The story began in the Worldberry Forest, which initially appeared peaceful and bathed in light. A wounded man emerged into view, visibly exhausted and struggling to breathe. His face bore signs of fatigue, and his injuries were evident, painting a grim picture of a situation. The man was surrounded by a group of hostile fighters, and several bodies lay scattered on the ground, marking the aftermath of a brutal battle. The leader of the opposing group sat leisurely, witnessing the enemy were dealt with. One of her attendees was waiting for someone to arrive, though they had yet to show, despite all efforts. He asked his leader, asking what they should do next. The leader's response was cold and firm, insisting that they be killed immediately. Without hesitation, a burly fighter charged forward, ready to carry out the command with a lethal strike. In a moment of terror, the wounded man braced himself, certain that the end was near. Just then, a young man appeared at high speed, intervening just in time to stop the blow, saving the wounded man from the fatal strike. With a swift motion, the newcomer flung the attacker aside, neutralizing the threat with ease. The wounded man's companions, seeing the young man's timely arrival, felt a surge of relief. They called out his name, Jaehyeon, expressing their gratitude for his quick rescue. The opposing fighters, now furious, began shouting, urging each other to attack Jaehyeon all at once, hoping to overwhelm him through sheer numbers. But Jaehyeon proved to be extraordinarily powerful, effortlessly repelling their attacks. His sword was wielded with unmatched speed and precision, and with each counterattack, another enemy fell to the ground. The tide of battle shifted dramatically in his favor. Standing tall and smiling confidently, Jaehyeon declared that no matter how many of them attacked together, it would change nothing. They were simply no match for him. It was then that his in-game identity was revealed. Jaehyeon's name was Hyrkan, and his title was the Hero Slayer. Jaehyeon's comrades, filled with regret, apologized for dragging him into such a dangerous situation. They confessed that they had never anticipated that the enemies would set a trap, but Jaehyeon waved off their apologies, assuring them that they were not to blame for what had happened. He reached out his hand to the injured man, helping him back on his feet. The man gazed at Jaehyeon, surprised by the kindness, while the others around him echoed their thanks, grateful for his actions. Jaehyeon reassured them that none of it was their fault. He then turned his attention to the real issue at hand, the opponents who had always been unable to put up a fair fight due to a lack of skill. His words were unmistakably aimed at Jaehyeon. With a mocking smile, he asked her if she agreed with his assessment, clearly trying to provoke her. Jaehyeon's response was sharp and dismissive. She mocked Jaehyeon and his companions, claiming that they are merely trashed banded together, built on hollow emotions. Continuing her derision, she sneered that no matter how many weaklings joined forces, it wouldn't matter in the end. Jaehyeon's true identity soon came to light. Her full name was Jaehyeon Chai, a member of the Thunder Hunters, and her title was the Thunder Queen. Jaehyeon continued to mock her, pointing out how she was always angry, attacking recklessly, and losing battle after battle to those she deemed beneath her. Seething with rage, Jaehyeon shot back, warning Jaehyeon not to push his luck, or he would regret it. But Jaehyeon merely smirked and raising his hand to turn his watch. Sarcastically, he questioned the notion of regret, making it clear that he feared nothing from her. In that moment, Jaehyeon activated his watch ability called the First Slot, causing a dramatic change in his appearance. A powerful, distinctive battle outfit materialized around him. With his transformation complete, he smiled confidently and turned to Jaehyeon, telling her that regret was a feeling only the weak, like her, would ever know. Jaehyeon's fury intensified. She shouted at him, calling him an arrogant bastard before ordering her group to eliminate him immediately. But Jaehyeon stood his ground, still smiling defiantly, declaring that no matter how hard they tried, they would never be able to kill him. However, Jaehyeon's confidence faltered when an unexpected turn of events occurred. To his shock, he suddenly found himself stabbed from behind. The betrayal came from the very comrades he had trusted, the ones he had fought alongside. His health points dropped rapidly, and warnings began flashing on his screen, signaling that his movements were now restricted. With great effort, Jaehyeon asked how such a betrayal was possible. One of his companions, remorseful, apologized and confessed that they had deceived him. The leader of the traitor explained their motives, admitting that they had all needed the money and asking Jaehyeon not to hate them for their actions. Stunned and filled with anger, Jaehyeon was unable to comprehend how those he had considered his closest friends could betray him so easily. At that moment, Jaehyeon appeared once more, laughing cruelly, as if the entire situation were some form of entertainment to her. The scene began with Jaehyeon mocking Jaehyeon for his naive belief in the fake bond of friendship he had with his teammates, emphasizing that emotions like trust and loyalty meant nothing when compared to money. She then approached him, coldly stating that she would now make sure to remove him from the game permanently. She continued to humiliate him, mocking that if she kept killing him each time he logged in, he wouldn't even be able to take a single step forward in the game. She reminded him of his past confession, where he had admitted to being a worthless nobody in real life, and how the game was all he had left. With a vicious, mocking smile, she told him that he had now returned to being that pathetic person once again. Unable to bear the insult, Jaehyeon exploded in rage and lunged at her, demanding she be silent. His attack, however, proved futile. The traitor struck him down easily, and his blood spilled across the ground as everyone stood around him, watching. As she stood there unbothered, Jaehyeon thanked the others for helping to rid them of Jaehyeon, her tone full of relief. In his final moments, Jaehyeon, consumed by rage and deep pain, asked why they had betrayed him after everything he had done for the team. One of his former comrades shouted at him to just die already, revealing that they had been paid couple millions just to kill him. They asked what he had expected them to do in the face of such a sum. The shock was immense for Jaehyeon. All of the pain, the betrayal, the loss, it had all been for money. Even after everything he had given them, he now realized how hollow their words had been when they had once claimed they were like family. As he reproached them for the devastation they had caused, their faces showed fake expressions of guilt and fear, but by then, it was too late. The game's notification soon flashed on the screen, declaring that Jaehyeon had died. The death notification blinked repeatedly, confirming the end. The game officially informed him that he could not log in again for 48 hours due to the death penalty. Jaehyeon awoke in the real world, drained and physically exhausted from the trauma he had just endured in the game. In that moment, he broke down, sorrowfully admitting to himself that he had lost everything. Information about the game Warlord was then displayed, showcasing its status as one of the world's most popular and successful games. A live stream clip followed, showing players engaged in a fierce battle against a powerful red dragon, their actions eliciting excited reactions from viewers. The game, built on cutting-edge virtual reality technology, generated unbelievable amounts of money. It was the one thing Jaehyeon had ever excelled at in real life. Having always been labeled as worthless or trash by others, Jaehyeon had found a sense of purpose and recognition in the game. When he first demonstrated his exceptional skills, one impressed player had approached him, astonished by his abilities, and asked about his level. That player had smiled and offered to team up with him. In that moment, Jaehyeon had felt a rare sense of belonging. Jaehyeon began to reflect sorrowfully on what had happened to him. For a fleeting moment, he decided he would forgive those who had betrayed him. But within moments, a wave of intense anger overtook him, and his resolve shifted. The decision was made. He would hunt down and kill each one of them in brutal revenge for their betrayal. Fuming over all the pain and sacrifices he had made for them, he placed a call to someone named Dong-Soo. As he ran down the street, lost in thought, he failed to notice the pedestrian light turning red. By the time he realized, it was too late. He was struck by a speeding truck with tremendous force. The scene was soon covered in blood from the impact, and people nearby screamed in panic, shouting that someone had just been run over. Jaehyeon lay on the ground, struggling between life and death, his phone announcing that the number he had dialed was unavailable. A cruel irony struck him. Of all things, he had been hit by a garbage truck. With great effort, he whispered to himself that he couldn't die now. A painful memory resurfaced in his mind. He recalled his former comrades shouting at him to die quickly, revealing that they had been paid to kill him, a sum of couple millions. He also remembered Jaehyeon's mocking expression as she defeated him in his final moments. With a renewed sense of resolve, he vowed that he would have his revenge, merciless and brutal. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared, and it seemed as though a mysterious connection was being established. A notification soon followed, indicating that his connection was being verified. Another message then appeared, welcoming him back into the game under the alias Hyrkan. Stunned by the sudden turn of events, Jaehyeon found himself facing a challenge. The game had placed him in a tutorial stage, survive an encounter with the legendary Minotaur, Lord of the Labyrinth. Jaehyeon was left in shock, questioning what was going on and how this could be happening to him. Frustrated, one of the new players shouted at Jaehyeon, urging him to pull himself together and help fight the terrifying giant monster attacking them. They quickly realized that defeating the creature alone would be impossible and proposed working together. During the conversation, Jaehyeon expressed disbelief at the appearance of a monster that had been removed from the game 5 years ago due to its extreme difficulty. His teammate, visibly confused, responded that the game Warlord had only been released 10 months ago. Jaehyeon stood there, repeating in astonishment that the game had been out for just 10 months. His teammates noticed his strange behavior and asked what was wrong, clearly puzzled by his reaction to the new information. One of them urged him to focus and get ready, telling him to wait for the signal to move. However, Jaehyeon ignored the instructions and began walking ahead of the group without a word. His teammates, bewildered, called out to him, asking where he was going, but he continued to advance in silence, deepening their confusion. They shouted in disbelief, thinking his actions were reckless, especially with the powerful monster still in their path. At that moment, the beast charged at Jaehyeon with incredible ferocity, aiming to strike him down. His teammates yelled warnings, telling him he would die if he kept this up, but Jaehyeon showed no hesitation. He faced the monster head-on, exuding confidence and resolve. With a series of powerful strikes, he delivered a fatal blow to the creature, showcasing an overwhelming strength. The beast let out a fierce roar as Jaehyeon's blow swiftly brought it down. The two other players stood in stunned silence, utterly amazed that Jaehyeon had defeated the monster within moments. They both stared at him in astonishment, attempting to speak to him. One of the players stepped forward, a smile on his face, openly praising Jaehyeon's incredible talent and expressing his desire for him to join his team. He extended his hand toward Jaehyeon in a gesture eerily reminiscent of a past moment in Jaehyeon's memory when he had been betrayed. In that instant, Jaehyeon's expression changed, and anger flashed in his eyes. He coldly told the players that he had already made his decision moments ago. Confused, the two players asked what decision he was referring to. Without warning, Jaehyeon launched a powerful strike at them, his eyes blazing with fury as blood splattered around him. Jaehyeon muttered grimly to himself that if he ever trusted anyone again in this life, he would be no better than a dog. A notification then appeared on his screen, declaring the return of Hyrkan, the hero slayer, to the past. Right after, Jaehyeon awoke in a strange place. He removed a virtual reality helmet from his head and looked around in confusion, trying to figure out where he was. He quickly realized that he was inside a gaming store, specifically a gear shop that sold virtual reality equipment. As memories flooded back, Jaehyeon recalled that 5 years ago, he had been poor and used to play in the store because he couldn't afford his own gear. He wondered seriously if he had truly returned to the past. Once the thought settled, he immediately resolved that if this was indeed the case, there was much he needed to do. He moved quickly, darting through the crowded store while his mind raced with plans. He reminded himself that he now had 5 years' worth of future knowledge and experience. With this advantage, he knew he could carry out his revenge without hesitation. He approached a store clerk, handed her his payment card, and requested the base gear unit. The clerk appeared slightly flustered, but assured him that she would assist him right away. A wave of excitement and anxiety washed over Jaehyeon as he began to formulate his next steps to level up quickly in the game. However, the clerk soon surprised him by stating that his balance was insufficient to complete the purchase. Jaehyeon stood stunned, shocked by this unexpected setback. He smiled bitterly, realizing just how dire his financial situation had been in the past. He stood there, deeply frustrated, blaming himself for forgetting that he had no money. He remembered that the only reason he had played in the store before was because he couldn't afford to buy his own device. The pressure began to mount, and he wondered what he could do now. Should he try to earn money quickly, though he knew he couldn't afford to waste time waiting? At that moment, an image of Jaehyeon appeared on a nearby advertisement screen, part of a campaign for the game. The ad posed a question that demanded attention, asking what they were waiting for. The words were bold and direct, as if daring anyone to second-guess themselves. It declared that the strong did not fear challenges, and that hesitation was a luxury no one could afford in the midst of battle. Jaehyeon stood silently before the advertisement, watching as Jaehyeon, the Thunder Queen, appeared on screen, calling upon everyone to become true masters of war. He remained in front of the massive display showing the game's title, Warlord, as the bold caption urged him to start immediately. Lost in thought, Jaehyeon reflected on his current situation, carefully weighing what his next move should be. The image of Jaehyeon's mocking face resurfaced in his mind, accompanied by her scornful words, telling him that once again he had become nothing more than worthless trash. A surge of determination rose in him. Jaehyeon resolved that he couldn't afford to wait any longer. Hesitation, he knew, was a luxury he could no longer afford. As the sun began to set, the scene shifted to a modest, simple apartment, his home. There, a VR capsule gaming system had just been delivered and installed in his room. The technician had completed the setup, informing him that everything was ready before promptly leaving. Jaehyeon responded with a brief, dismissive reply before falling deep into thought, holding a card in his hand. He reminded himself that the fastest way to get money was through this card. It was an advertisement for a quick and easy loan service. Not long ago, he had sat across from a man and requested a loan of 10 million won. The man had assured him, with casual indifference, that it could be arranged. But then the man had paused, adding ominously unsettling, gentle smile. In a sudden, violent motion, the man plunged a knife into the card on the table, delivering a clear, direct threat. He warned Jaehyeon that if he failed to repay the money, his life would become an unbearable hell. Though shaken and filled with anxiety, Jaehyeon said nothing. Despite the obvious risks, he made the decision to take the card, affirming to himself that he no longer cared about the consequences. He then began donning the VR headset, assuring himself that he was ready to risk everything. Even if it meant descending into hell, he would take whatever steps necessary to avenge those who had betrayed him. The faces of the traitors flashed through his mind, and his resolve to take revenge had never been stronger. Filled with fury and anticipation, he ordered the system to begin the connection immediately. The system quickly recognized him and confirmed his login into the game. Jaehyeon entered the game world as his character Hyrkan and received a formal welcome to the universe of Warlord. He stood silently, waiting for a particular character to appear and assist him, struggling to recall her name. At that moment, a girl with blonde hair, radiating golden energy, appeared before him. She introduced herself as Ariadne, explaining that she was there to guide him on his journey. Jaehyeon immediately recognized her identity. Ariadne extended her hand and began explaining the game's rules, inviting him to select one of the basic available classes. She went on to clarify that he would need to choose one starting class from a set of 3. She emphasized that the skills he chose to develop now would determine the specialized path he would follow later in the game. The first class she described was the Warrior, a fighter on the front lines, using direct combat weapons. Jaehyeon considered it, recognizing that his prior experience might help him level up quickly. However, he ultimately rejected it, understanding that progressing solo later would become too difficult. Ariadne then introduced the second class, the Priest, a support role focused on healing and assisting others. Without hesitation, Jaehyeon dismissed it. He told Ariadne bluntly that he had no intention of protecting or supporting others. Only one option remained for him. Ariadne smiled and wished him an enjoyable adventure as she began preparing to activate his selection. Golden strands of magical energy began flowing from her hands, surrounding him completely as she initiated the process to transport him to the next stage. The energy enveloped him entirely, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. A system message appeared before him, informing him that he had selected his base class and would now be transported to the tower corresponding to his choice. Jaehyeon arrived at the tower and was greeted by a commanding voice, welcoming him as a young seeker of knowledge. The voice belonged to someone named Golko, the guide responsible for training players who chose the mage class. Golko asked Jaehyeon what type of magic he wanted to study. Without hesitation, Jaehyeon replied that he wanted to learn dark magic. Golko was stunned by the response, pausing for a moment as he struggled to process it. He tried to convince himself that he had misheard due to his age and asked if Jaehyeon had meant earth magic instead. But Jaehyeon firmly repeated his desire to study dark magic. Golko's expression shifted, concern overtaking him. He warned Jaehyeon that dark magic was extremely dangerous and could potentially destroy the user's soul. But Jaehyeon replied with clear resolve, stating that he understood the risks and had deliberately chosen this path. Golko began trembling, visibly shaken by Jaehyeon's bold decision. Suddenly, Golko transformed into a terrifying shadowy figure before Jaehyeon, assuring him that everything would proceed smoothly. His appearance changed entirely, now resembling a skeletal being. He spoke to Jaehyeon with a serious tone, remarking that it had been a long time since anyone had chosen such a path. He told Jaehyeon that if he was truly ready, he should place his hand on the skill book that had appeared before him, warning him to choose wisely and with caution. Without hesitation, Jaehyeon placed his hand on the skill book immediately. Despite Golko's warning that this path was too dangerous for the reckless, Jaehyeon smiled with great confidence and declared that he was not the kind of person who could be called reckless. Golko burst into loud laughter, impressed by Jaehyeon's confidence and daring choice. He admitted that Jaehyeon was truly fascinating and that he hadn't encountered someone like him in a very long time. Jaehyeon then recalled a famous video from his past life featuring a player who used necromancy, the art of summoning the dead. In that video, the lone player had managed to defeat a powerful boss without any help. At that moment, Jaehyeon realized how desperately he needed a power similar to that one. A system message appeared, confirming that he had officially become a necromancer, granting him the title of novice in necromancy and a skill called Skeleton Shard. With a confident smile, Jaehyeon repeated the name of his new skill, Skeleton Shard. He activated the skill, and a glowing shard of skeleton began to materialize from magical energy before him. A message appeared explaining that a skeletal warrior consumed magical energy in order to fully manifest. Jaehyeon stood silently, watching the skeleton form in front of him, and declared to himself with determination that in this life, he would become a necromancer. The skeleton fully took shape, signaling the completion of Jaehyeon's transformation into a true necromancer. With a confident smile, Jaehyeon declared that it was time to level up. He then asked himself where the training dungeon was located. Turning to glance at the skeleton he had summoned, he was met with a bizarre scene. The skeleton's skull broke down from its spine and fell down like a glob of ball. Jaehyeon stood in stunned silence for a moment, unable to fully process what he was seeing. Without wasting more time, he stepped into a glowing portal that had appeared before him, emerging into the beginner training dungeon. Concerned, Jaehyeon began questioning the skeleton's odd behavior. It certainly wasn't acting the way he remembered from his past life. He opened the skill window to review the details of the Skeleton Shard skill. As he read through the description, he assumed the strange behavior was due to his low mastery level of the skill. This realization made him determined to increase his level quickly. Deep in thought, a loud growl suddenly echoed around him. A group of creatures, coal wolves, appeared, and their arrival seemed perfectly timed for a practical test. Though not particularly strong, they were fast enough to pose a decent challenge for the summoned skeleton. Jaehyeon immediately cast Skeleton Shard with force toward the incoming enemies. Magical energy began to form rapidly, preparing to summon the skeleton once again. The skeleton materialized fully and was ready for battle, automatically assuming a combat stance. Upon sensing the presence of foes, the wolves cautiously began approaching, gearing up to strike. With a confident smirk, Jaehyeon commanded the skeleton to kill them. The skeleton charged forward, attacking the wolves with surprising strength. To Jaehyeon's astonishment, the skeleton looked far better than expected. He realized that at this rate, he might reach the top level in a short time. However, his surprise quickly turned into shock when the skeleton's bones suddenly scattered in every direction. Jaehyeon stood frozen in disbelief, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. The skeleton's skull fell to the ground, bearing an almost comically sad expression. Overwhelmed with confusion, Jaehyeon fell stunned and unsure of what he had just witnessed. He quickly called for the skill window, desperate to find out what had gone wrong. As he read further, he discovered that he had forgotten to assign a combat mode for the skeleton. The skill included an AI system that learned from battle experience and offered 3 modes: defense, offense, and a special mode. Resting his hand on his head with a sigh, Jaehyeon realized the root of the problem and calmly admitted that he hadn't set a mode yet. He decided to activate the defensive mode first. As soon as it was activated, a bright gleam appeared in the skeleton's eyes. However, what followed only deepened his disappointment. The wolves began dragging the skeleton around and tearing it apart with ease, as if it wasn't resisting at all. Once again, Jaehyeon stood dumbfounded, unable to believe that what he was witnessing was supposed to be defensive mode. In a shaky voice and with growing desperation, Jaehyeon decided to activate the 3rd mode, the special mode, hoping it might finally work. It turned out that the skeleton had started dancing. Jaehyeon realized the situation had become disastrous after witnessing the skeleton's performance. Tears welled up his eyes as he blamed himself for how things had turned out. Jaehyeon collapsed onto the ground, overwhelmed by despair. He muttered to himself that he was on the verge of losing his mind. He attempted to delete the character he had chosen, but was met with a system message informing him that accounts less than 3 months old could not delete characters. Sitting helplessly, he lamented that he couldn't even change his selected class. The looming reality of his loan payments beginning the next month crossed his mind, and in frustration, he sarcastically thought that perhaps he should get run over again. The thought made him wonder why his luck was so terrible, especially since things had just started to improve slightly. His gaze then fell on the useless skeleton that had been of no help at all, further deepening his frustration and anger. He began scolding the skeleton, telling it that it was driving him insane and ordering it to stay still. Then he suddenly recalled a skilled necromancer from his previous life and wondered how that person had managed with skeletons like this one. An idea struck him. He reopened the skill description window and found something important he had missed before. The summoned creature was equipped with a deep learning system that allowed it to gain experience through combat. That was when Jaehyeon realized that the skeleton had been observing him during his battles with the coal wolves and learning from his actions. Standing next to the skeleton, he decided to make full use of this new information. With a confident smile, he spoke to the skeleton, trying to get its attention. The skeleton turned toward him, slightly confused. Jaehyeon, now brimming with confidence, addressed the skeleton, telling it that it was incredibly lucky to have a master like him. He went on to say that, despite appearances, people used to think of him as a genius, and he had trained all his former team members until they reached the top. He instructed the skeleton to remember one core rule in combat. Without warning, he lunged at it, landing a strike as he shouted that the rule was simple. If it couldn't dodge the attack, Jaehyeon stated that it will die. The skeleton took the blow hard and collapsed to the ground instantly. Jaehyeon struck again, knocking it down once more. Unrelenting, he told the skeleton to get ready for another attack and continued delivering a relentless series of blows. With every strike, the skeleton fell, but Jaehyeon showed no mercy, determined to train it. He then began giving the skeleton important combat advice, telling it not to stand there foolishly after being hit, but to think about how to counterattack after dodging. He asked if the skeleton understood, and it stood in a ready stance, signaling its understanding. Time passed, and the coal wolves respawned, launching another attack on the skeleton. This time, the skeleton quickly applied what it had learned, skillfully dodging the wolves' attacks. Seizing an opportunity, it delivered a powerful blow to one of the wolves. The skeleton continued fighting with impressive skill, while Jaehyeon watched in astonishment. Suddenly, the skeleton stopped and looked at Jaehyeon with deep admiration. He gently scolded it, reminding it that he had warned against losing focus during battle, but smiled slightly and told it that its last move hadn't been bad at all. As Jaehyeon continued training, the skeleton's shard skill began to improve rapidly. He felt a sense of joy and satisfaction when a message appeared before him, informing him that his player level had increased. He then moved on to Vigus Castle, a bustling beginner's village filled with new players. Walking through the village among the crowd, Jaehyeon reflected on the progress the skeleton had made. With just a few more days of training, it would be able to clear the training dungeon with ease. He also realized that the real challenge was about to begin and that his first goal would be reaching level 10. Suddenly, a voice called out to him. He turned toward the sound and saw a large man standing in front of him, surrounded by his followers. The man aggressively scolded Jaehyeon for bumping into his shoulder without apologizing. Jaehyeon assessed the group and thought to himself that they looked like nothing more than third-rate thugs. Annoyed at having his time wasted, he seriously considered killing them on the spot. Just as one of the men was about to attack, someone appeared, dressed in intricately drawn clothing, and effortlessly stopped the assault. The newcomer smirked and told the attacker that it wasn't right to hit people like that. The large man, furious, demanded to know who the stranger was and whether he was with Jaehyeon. The newcomer replied that he wasn't exactly with him. Jaehyeon instantly recognized the stranger. It was Matador Shev, a very powerful warrior from his previous life. He couldn't help but notice the man's massive muscles and his signature odd attire. Jaehyeon vividly remembered that Matador had been a first-class warrior and the strongest player in his past life. Confusion and unease filled him as he wondered why such a legendary warrior would be in this place. Meanwhile, Matador stood, his disapproval of the attacker's behavior evident in his sarcastic tone. The thug attempted to justify his actions, claiming that Jaehyeon had struck him first. He insisted that Matador had no right to intervene without knowing who Jaehyeon was. Matador, calm and composed, smiled as he responded, quoting an old saying about an eye for an eye, implying that Jaehyeon had every right to retaliate. The moment he spoke, Matador unleashed a fiery combat aura, which struck fear into the attackers. The large man froze, terror evident in his eyes, while Jaehyeon observed the situation closely. With his usual calmness and sarcasm, Matador remarked that the man had struck his palm with a fist first. A terrifying grin spread across his face, and he added that it was only fair to return the favor. Just then, one of the thug's companions screamed, warning him that the man before them was Matador Shev, a figure feared for his overwhelming strength. In a panic, the companion explained that Matador was the leader of the Red Bulls Guild, one of the top 30 guilds, and was famous for his obsession with fighting. He emphasized that Matador was the notorious fighter known as the Killer. The attacker's shock deepened as he questioned, in fear, why someone as famous as Matador would get involved in such a trivial matter. Matador advanced on him with a menacing gait, his voice cold and cutting as he demanded to know what the response would be now. The man froze in place, unable to utter a word. Within moments, he and his companions turned and fled, screaming apologies and terror-stricken at Matador's power. Matador smiled with satisfaction, pleased that the situation had been resolved with words alone. As the attackers retreated in fear, he turned to Jaehyeon with a friendly smile, asking if he was all right. He advised him not to pay attention to people like that. However, Jaehyeon quietly distanced himself from Matador, leaving him puzzled by the reaction. Before walking off, Jaehyeon coldly stated that he no longer needed his help before walking away. Matador stood in stunned silence, unsure of how to respond. Chuckling softly to himself, he acknowledged that Jaehyeon was indeed a cold individual. As Jaehyeon moved farther away, anger and frustration welled up inside him. He couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness he had experienced in the face of Matador's overwhelming strength. His hand trembled from the intensity of that power, and he admitted to himself that fear had gripped him in that moment. Jaehyeon made a firm decision then. The next time he met Matador, he would be a completely different person. His expression hardened with resolve as he silently vowed to change. The scene then shifted back to the training dungeon, where flames flickered along the walls, casting shadows over the space. Jaehyeon sat alone, his mind preoccupied with the vast gap in strength between himself and formidable players like Matador. He thought of Matador and another figure named Jaehyeon, realizing that their powers were nearly on par. If he sought revenge, he would need to grow much stronger than he was now. Suddenly, a powerful beast resembling a tiger appeared, launching a fierce attack. Jaehyeon's summoned skeleton quickly intervened, striking the tiger with skill and precision. The skeleton maintained its aggressive assault, dealing heavy damage to the beast. After a swift battle, a system notification appeared before Jaehyeon, informing him that the skeleton had successfully killed the tiger and that his level had increased once again. Despite the success, Jaehyeon was not satisfied. It had taken him 3 days to reach level 10, longer than he had expected. He looked at the skeleton, which appeared tired and worn out from the fight. He found its condition amusing, but a message soon appeared, congratulating Jaehyeon for finally reaching level 10 and informing him that the training dungeon had been cleared of monsters. The beginner's mark was removed from his profile, and the rewards began to transfer to him. Jaehyeon felt immense joy as the items arrived. A device called the War Watch materialized on his wrist, equipped with various features such as status, quests, map, inventory, and communication tools. Jaehyeon felt a surge of excitement at using this device again after such a long time. He requested his status window, and it soon appeared, displaying his updated information. Name, Hyrkan, level 10, class, Necromancer, along with his stats points in strength, endurance, intelligence, and mana. A message then appeared, prompting him to distribute his available stat points. Jaehyeon paused to think carefully. This was his first time allocating points, so he needed to be wise. A necromancer would naturally invest in magic or intelligence, but Jaehyeon smiled confidently and, to his surprise, chose to invest all his points into strength. Once the points were allocated, a message appeared confirming that his strength had increased by 50 points. Jaehyeon looked down at his hand with a deep sense of determination as a new system window appeared, confirming that his total strength had now reached 53 points. This was exactly what he had hoped for, and a surge of satisfaction washed over him, reaffirming that he had made the right decision. However, the skeleton stood nearby, staring at him with wide, disappointed blue eyes. Its expression seemed to convey the belief that Jaehyeon had abandoned the path of a necromancer by focusing on increasing his physical strength instead of his mana or intelligence. Noticing the skeleton's gaze, Jaehyeon grew irritated. He crossed his arms and asked what the skeleton thought it was doing. After a brief moment, he reached out and gently tapped the skeleton on the head. He reassured it that he hadn't abandoned the path of a necromancer. Instead, he explained that he was trying to teach the skeleton and help it grow stronger. Jaehyeon went on to elaborate that raising his mana or intelligence wouldn't make much of a difference at this stage of his journey. On the other hand, boosting his physical strength would allow him to teach the skeleton the combat techniques he had mastered at the peak of his former power. Speaking with serious conviction, he added that he was betting his life on the skeleton's development and that it needed to focus on its training. With a confident smile, he added that there were always other ways to compensate for the lack of stats. After reassuring the skeleton, Jaehyeon made his way to the Adventurers Guild building at the Vigus Castle branch. Inside, he was greeted by the sight of eager new adventurers, all waiting excitedly for the chance to take on quests. The place was bustling with energy, and he overheard adventurers bickering over who would be first to claim the next available quest. The atmosphere was lively, but Jaehyeon quickly realized that the available quests at this stage were not particularly great. Despite this, the excitement in the air was palpable as the adventurers were still at the beginning of their journeys. He approached one of the guild staff members and politely asked to see the available quest list. The staff member glanced at him in surprise before explaining that most of the quests left were quite difficult, and no one seemed willing to take them. The staff member then asked Jaehyeon if he was really sure about selecting something like that. Jaehyeon paused, his eyes scanning the list of quests. Silently, he admitted to himself that they were, in fact, not ideal quests. But at that very moment, a confident expression crossed his face. He had found exactly what he had been looking for. The quest he chose was titled Cave of Mount Bima, with the objective being to eliminate all low-level monsters in the vicinity of Mount Bima. The reward was a modest 10 gold coins. The guild staff member, sensing Jaehyeon's unwavering resolve, asked again with concern if he was truly certain about accepting such a low-level quest with such a small reward. Jaehyeon nodded, his resolve unshaken. With a smile, he thought to himself that completing this task before reaching level 15 would grant him the rare title Prospect. He recalled that acquiring such titles could significantly boost a character's stats, and the Prospect title would specifically increase them by a percentage, making it an incredibly valuable asset. Jaehyeon was confident that obtaining this title would mark the beginning of his journey to becoming an overpowered character. Excited, he made his way forward with the next step in his plan, preparing the necessary equipment. Jaehyeon arrived near Mount Bima, where the quest was to take place. However, as he stepped out to the light, his excitement quickly turned to shock and deep frustration. The gear he had obtained was ridiculous and completely unsuitable for the task at hand. He was wearing brightly colored, comically strange clothes that seemed entirely out of place for someone setting out to hunt monsters. He felt an overwhelming sense of embarrassment at his bizarre appearance, which was entirely inappropriate for the mission he had ahead. Anger and frustration bubbled up inside him as he stared at his reflection. Internally, he screamed in irritation. He had not had enough money to buy decent equipment, having spent most of his funds on the skeleton's gear. Now he was stuck with these low-quality items, which only added to his growing frustration. Determined to change that, Jaehyeon made up his mind to complete the quest as quickly as possible, earn enough money, and then buy proper clothes. As he moved through the forest, reaffirming his resolve to complete his mission swiftly, a blood-soaked hand suddenly reached out from the bushes. The hand seemed to plead for help before its owner collapsed unconscious. The scene slowly revealed a wounded young man crawling weakly through the grass, his voice barely audible as he called for help, blood staining his face. His voice slowly faded into the forest, while his trembling hand remained pressed to the ground, a clear sign of despair. Nearby, a group of boys with sinister expressions stood, whispering and laughing in cruel amusement as they watched their victims suffering. Elsewhere in the forest, a young player shouted in delight, announcing that he had finally reached his destination. The young man, named Multi, stood proudly in his gleaming armor, boasting that his adventure was about to begin at Mount Bima. He proudly proclaimed that he had reached level 11 and might soon rank among the top players in the game. But his bragging was abruptly interrupted by a nearby cry for help. Multi rushed toward the sound of distress and quickly spotted a man carrying his bloodied friend, begging for assistance. The man claimed that the creature which attacked them was unlike anything they had ever encountered. When Multi asked for details, they explained that they had barely escaped with their lives and that they no longer had any healing potions left after the sudden ambush. The wounded men added that they had only fled by sheer luck, but without healing potions, his friend wouldn't survive for long. Multi reassured them that he had a few potions on him and began to dig through his inventory to offer one. The gay-haired man, teary-eyed, thanked him with an overwhelming sense of relief, promising that they would repay the favor one day. However, just as Multi turned around to offer the potion, the two men suddenly struck him from behind with a surprise attack. Their cruel smiles stretched across their faces as blood splattered across the ground. In a single decisive blow, Multi collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, his blood staining the earth beneath him. The attacker mocked his gullibility, laughing that it had made him an easy target. One of them sneered, saying they would make full use of his belongings, disregarding his faint groans of protest. Multi weakly protested, calling them out for deceiving him, but they only scoffed, calling him a coward and blaming him for being naive. Their leader laughed mockingly, saying only a fool would fall for such a cheap trick. A system notification then appeared, announcing the death of the player Multi and the extinguishing of his aura. Another message followed, showing the player's watch dropping to the ground as loot for the thieves. The gang gathered around the fallen watch, laughing, with one of them remarking that tormenting beginners was always a never-ending source of fun. Their leader smiled viciously, urging the group to go find the next victim, proudly displaying the emblem of the deadly Ralph family, a villain PK guild. Elsewhere in the forest, Jaehyeon skeletons stood poised and ready, facing two massive tree beasts growling menacingly from the shadows. The wooden wolves lunged at him with glowing eyes, their red fangs burning like embers. Jaehyeon raised a finger and declared the activation of attack mode, and the skeleton's eyes lit up with a piercing blue glow. The skeleton lunged forward, its glowing sword cutting through the air with a cold gleam. Its initial strike tore through one of the wolves, while the claws of the other shattered harmlessly against the blade. A stream of system notifications flashed across the screen, confirming that the skeleton had slain the ancient tree wolves and earned hundreds of experience points. Jaehyeon smiled faintly to himself, acknowledging that equipping his skeleton first had been the right decision from the start. He glanced down at his odd clothing, reminding himself that appearance didn't matter as long as it served its purpose. Meanwhile, the skeleton stood with its hands on its mouth in a comical gesture of embarrassment, as if it felt sorry for its master. Jaehyeon told the skeleton to stop acting so strangely and to prepare for the next task, explaining that they needed to level up quickly to complete their mission in the area. The skeleton picked up its weapon, ready to move forward. But just as they prepared to continue, an arrow shot through the air at high speed from a distance, striking the skeleton in the head and causing it to freeze in place, stunned. Jaehyeon was caught off guard by the sudden attack, looking around cautiously to identify the source. Two men soon approached, one of them quickly apologizing for the accidental shot, claiming he had mistaken them for monsters from a distance due to their appearance. The men approached with an apologetic demeanor, trying to explain the situation, while the skeleton remained on guard, prepared to protect its master. Jaehyeon accepted their apology coolly, but began to feel suspicious. Their odd expressions and the tension in the air made him uneasy. He quickly noticed a player's watch on one of their wrists and a blood-stained knife hidden behind the other's back, deepening his doubts about their intentions. Jaehyeon muttered to himself, scoffing at their nerve, and immediately realized they were planning to deceive him. But then, he suddenly smiled, deciding to play along. He told them that he might be willing to forgive the incident if they gave him just one mana potion as compensation. The two men pretended to be embarrassed, claiming they didn't have any mana potions, but they offered to help him level up as a way to make up for their mistake. Jaehyeon raised an eyebrow and asked if they were sure they wanted to help him. They quickly confirmed that it was the least they could do after what had happened. At that moment, the roar of beasts echoed through the forest. One of the men smiled, saying it was the perfect time to start leveling. They explained their plan to Jaehyeon. They would attack and weaken the monsters, and all he had to do was land the final blow to earn the experience points. Jaehyeon agreed, still watching them with caution as they whispered among themselves, reaffirming their malicious plan. The large warrior stepped forward, provoking the wooden wolves and drawing their rage just as they had planned. The mage accompanying the thieves cast a spell that enhanced the monster's attack power, causing its claws to glow with a terrifying red energy. With a sinister smile, he deliberately pushed one of the wolves toward Jaehyeon, pretending it was an accident as part of their trap. Jaehyeon was caught off guard when the wolf charged directly at him, its glowing claws outstretched. Instinctively, he raised his arms, preparing for the attack. From a distance, the group of thieves watched, expecting Jaehyeon to be easily overwhelmed by the sudden assault. But much to their surprise, Jaehyeon swiftly defeated the wolf with the assistance of his skeleton. He then turned to scold the skeleton for reacting too slowly, shaking his head in mock disapproval. With a confident smile, he gave the thieves a thumbs up and told them to continue their support, leaving them stunned by his unexpected strength. The two men, growing anxious and increasingly afraid, began to question Jaehyeon's true level and abilities. They quickly decided to alter their strategy, thinking that perhaps a larger wave of monsters would be enough to overpower him. They sent a fresh batch of beasts to attack all at once, hoping to catch him off guard. During the chaos of the group attack, the warrior seized the opportunity to ambush Jaehyeon. He lunged at him from behind, raising his heavy hammer high and shouting that this time he wouldn't miss his finishing blow. Full of confidence, he swung the hammer with all his might, certain it would land squarely on its target. But to his utter shock, Jaehyeon dodged the strike with perfect timing, slipping away as the warrior's hammer missed by mere inches. The man screamed in disbelief as he watched his attack fail before his eyes. Jaehyeon moved with astonishing speed, sliding his sword beneath the warrior's massive arm, slicing through his body with precision. The warrior staggered backward, blood bursting from the deep gash in his chest, while the skeleton attacked from another angle. The remaining two thieves watched in shock, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. One of them shouted in disbelief, his voice trembling as he called out to his companions. Jaehyeon ordered the skeleton to launch another attack, prompting its eyes to glow a brilliant blue in preparation for the command. Together, they dashed forward at incredible speed, closing the distance between them and their opponents in mere seconds. One of the thieves began to scream, begging them to stop so they could talk, but Jaehyeon ignored him entirely. With a swift, coordinated strike, Jaehyeon and the skeleton delivered a double blow that landed with incredible force. Both thieves were knocked off their feet, their cries of pain echoing through the forest. The force of the blows sent them flying through the air, while Jaehyeon and the skeleton stood firmly in place, surrounded by a wave of blue energy they had unleashed. Jaehyeon turned away, coldly stating that he knew exactly what kind of people they were. He added that they always betrayed those who trusted them and robbed them of everything. Slowly, he stepped toward one of the wounded thieves and told him that such a trick might have worked on him in the past, but no longer. The injured thief began to plead for mercy, promising to give Jaehyeon everything he had in exchange for his life. But Jaehyeon was unmoved, cutting him off with two simple words, declaring that he no longer trusted humans. Without hesitation, he struck the man with a finishing blow, ending his life in an instant. A system notification appeared on the screen, announcing that the player Ralph had died and that 8 watches had been dropped without an owner. Jaehyeon looked down at the spoils, calmly stating that in the current situation, there was only one logical choice: to make the most of these rewards, starting with the clothes. Meanwhile, the skeleton, seemingly venting its frustration, aggressively kicked the corpse of the massive warrior. Though blood covered its bones, the skeleton seemed oddly moved as it looked at Jaehyeon. Sensing its unease, Jaehyeon gently asked if the skeleton wanted something for itself. He approached the skeleton, reaching out to envelop it in a magical blue light that healed its injuries. The skeleton, clearly excited, lifted its sword high as it stood proudly in its new pair of pants, looking every bit the warrior it had become. Jaehyeon laughed and asked if it really liked its new look that much. Then, in a calm tone, he remarked that appearance didn't matter in a game. What truly mattered was the core of one's strength. Despite this, Jaehyeon couldn't help but show off as he walked around in his newly acquired outfit. He chuckled slightly, whispering to the skeleton that the war watches they had obtained were truly a treasure. He explained that when a player's war watch was sold, a random item from its inventory was dropped as loot. These items could range from rare pieces like the Black Goblin pants and a sword infused with the essence of an ancient tree to curse skill books and even money, all of which made Jaehyeon laugh greedily as he described it as a real stroke of luck. Jaehyeon then said that these spoils had allowed him to create something new at an unexpectedly fast pace. He raised his hand to reveal a uniquely designed golden mask, smiling as he commented that he had finished crafting it even faster than he had anticipated. From now on, he would begin recording his gameplay, and to do so, he needed to build a strong identity to suit his new goals. He affirmed to himself that creating a distinctive persona would be crucial for the next stage of his journey. At that moment, Jaehyeon's expression shifted as he recalled a conversation about something similar. He sat proudly before a guild member, his enthusiasm unmistakable as he presented a bold idea. He suggested that if all the guild members wore the Jaehyeon mask, it would spread like wildfire. After a moment of contemplation, the man agreed with the idea, prompting Jaehyeon to smile widely. With excitement, he announced that the new guild would be named Jaehyeon Mask. He then looked down at the mask in his hands and paused, reflecting on how he had once considered creating a completely different identity. But in the end, he decided to stick with his original path. Lifting the mask into the air, he infused it with a glowing blue magical energy, declaring that he would no longer allow anyone to steal his achievements or belongings. Anger flashed across his face as he whispered with determination that he would use this mask to prove the legitimacy of his decisions and his worth. After putting the mask on, Jaehyeon turned to the skeleton and said it was time to go. His expression was now serious, his energy fueled by anticipation for the challenges ahead. The scene shifted to a cracked mountainous region resembling ancient ruins, with a gate at its center. Jaehyeon and the skeleton stepped through the gate, triggering a system message confirming they had entered the Baima Mountain Cave dungeon. Inside, Jaehyeon moved leisurely along the stone walls, commenting that he expected to encounter blue wolves in this dungeon. He added that the dungeon would not be easy, but now that his gear had improved, he felt confident that he could complete it in just 10 minutes. With excitement, Jaehyeon ran through the dungeon's narrow passageways, the skeleton following closely behind, fully prepared for whatever might come. However, several hours later, Jaehyeon puzzled as to why no monsters had appeared yet. Suddenly, he shouted in confusion, asking if there were no monsters in the dungeon at all. He muttered angrily, remarking that the situation seemed strange. If someone had already cleared the dungeon, a system message should have appeared. Suspicion crept into his thoughts, and he began to suspect it might be a system glitch. His eyes froze as he noticed something on the wall. He quickly moved closer to touch a swirling mass of glowing purple energy. In astonishment, he remarked that it was something completely different. The vortex began to rapidly expand, drawing in the surrounding air as though opening a new gate. A message appeared, informing him that he had discovered an instant dungeon called the Stage and asking whether he wanted to enter. Jaehyeon knew that instant dungeons appeared randomly inside regular ones, and that progress in the original dungeon would pause until the instant dungeon was completed. These instant dungeons were notoriously more difficult, offering better rewards, but at a greater risk. The catch was that the player had no choice but to either clear the dungeon or die trying. There was no third option. Jaehyeon considered backing out. He thought it would be smarter to avoid the risk, especially since dying would lock him out of the game for 2 days. He could use that time to complete other missions instead. But in the next moment, his expression shifted. He stood tall, firmly stating to himself that all he needed was to complete it. Without hesitation, he walked into the portal, ready to face whatever challenges lay beyond. As soon as he entered, a blinding light engulfed him, forcing him to raise his hand to shield his eyes. When the light faded, Jaehyeon found himself standing in a vast arena, reminiscent of a Roman Colosseum, with himself and the skeleton at the center. Looking around, Jaehyeon wondered aloud if this was some kind of arena duel. Despite the nerves tightening in his chest, he asked what kind of opponent they might be facing. Suddenly, the ground began to shake, and Jaehyeon glanced around in confusion, asking what was happening. Then, without warning, a massive werewolf-like creature appeared, standing tall before them. It glared menacingly, ready to strike. The giant werewolf roared, its terrifying sound echoing through the arena. A label appeared above it, identifying it as a corrupted werewolf, with no level displayed. Jaehyeon took a step back in disbelief, repeating the word corrupted under his breath. He wondered why such a powerful monster would appear in a place like this. Before he could think further, the beast charged at them with immense fury, launching its first attack. The shockwave of the strike rippled through the arena, and Jaehyeon was struck directly by the blow. It sent him flying backward, crashing painfully into the wall. Meanwhile, the arena was clouded in dust and smoke, and the skeleton stood amidst it, startled by what had just happened to Jaehyeon. The skeleton planted its feet firmly into the ground and raised its sword, the low sound it made signaling its readiness to defend to the end. Despite the danger, Jaehyeon stood up again, smirking sarcastically. He chuckled, remarking on how absurd the situation was becoming. Then, he laughed loudly, as if the surprises wouldn't stop today. He noted that corrupted monsters were usually tied to main quests, making him lucky to have encountered one now. With a sly grin, he ordered the skeleton to prepare for battle, joking that if they didn't defeat this monster, they wouldn't be eating dinner tonight. With a confident grin, Jaehyeon charged directly at the beast, eager to begin the fight. The skeleton already stood firm, and together, they advanced quickly and cautiously toward their opponent. The skeleton raised its sword high, and Jaehyeon used it as leverage to propel himself into the air, leaping high above the werewolf. The corrupted beast looked up in surprise, watching Jaehyeon as he prepared to strike from above. Excitement flickered across the werewolf's face, its eyes gleaming as though it were about to enjoy a delicious meal. At the same time, Jaehyeon summoned dark energy from within himself, preparing a new skill to unleash on the beast. Dark purple energy surged into his weapon, and with a fierce declaration, he activated the skill, Demon's Curse. As the skill took effect, the dark energy coiled around the werewolf, and shock spread across its face. The attack struck directly, causing the beast to stagger back with a cry of pain. Jaehyeon's blow successfully severed its arm. An assist message confirmed that the skill had been activated and that the enemy's attributes had decreased by 10%. Jaehyeon smiled with satisfaction, acknowledging that the skill wasn't bad for a first-time use. However, the monster wasn't finished. It roared in anger and resumed its attack, launching a furious punch at Jaehyeon. He braced himself for impact, but before the blow could land, a new notification flashed on the screen, announcing that the corrupted werewolf had entered a berserk state and that all status effect had been completely removed. Jaehyeon let out a dry laugh, sarcastically acknowledging how foolish it was to think that an instant dungeon would be that easy. At that moment, he knew it was time to use a special skill he had been saving for later. He raised his hand, pressing the device on his wrist to activate the new ability. A surge of immense dark blue energy erupted from his body, enveloping him in a wave of power. A spiral of energy formed around him, shooting into the sky as the ground trembled beneath his feet. Then, in a blinding flash, the energy burst outward, flooding the entire arena with light. When the glow faded, Jaehyeon stood revealed in a new set of armor, cloaked in dark energy. He declared with confidence that he was ready to continue the fight. This was the effect of his special skill, Slot On, one of the unique features in the game Warlord. The skill temporarily granted the user enhanced power drawn directly from the game's world. It activated an enhanced form, granting Jaehyeon temporary supernatural strength. This form was unique to each player, varying in appearance and offering individual enhancements. Players had collectively agreed to call this form Ultimate Mode. Jaehyeon now stood in his new form, enveloped in a brilliant blue aura. Raising his hand with renewed confidence, he prepared himself for the next phase of the battle. On the opposite side, the corrupted werewolf let out a horrifying roar, baring its massive fangs and glaring at Jaehyeon with savage intensity. With a terrifying speed, the werewolf lunged toward him. Cloaked in dark blue energy against the intensified werewolf's movements, Jaehyeon prepared to face the beast. The creature dashed sideways, its claws raised to strike with a powerful blow. It unleashed a rapid series of attacks, but Jaehyeon skillfully dodged each one, narrowly avoiding a swipe that came dangerously close. As the werewolf's claws slammed into the ground, creating a massive crater, Jaehyeon seized the moment, leaping away just in time to avoid another devastating strike. Jaehyeon realized then that this wasn't just any monster. Its speed and raw power made it a formidable opponent. If he took just a few more hits, the battle could easily end in the creature's favor. With a calm smile, he muttered to himself that he had a plan. He unleashed a sharp blue wave from his sword, aimed directly at the beast. The wave struck the corrupted werewolf, sending it reeling backward in pain. Jaehyeon stood firm, ready for more, his calm demeanor unshaken. This, he thought, was exactly what made the game so enjoyable, facing challenges like this. But in the next moment, his expression changed. He looked up in shock as the beast leapt high into the air, coming down with enormous force. Jaehyeon quickly retreated, narrowly avoiding the massive impact. As he dodged, he remembered that the beast was now in its berserk state, a phase that dramatically increased its power. As he got thrown in the air, Jaehyeon found the werewolf standing directly behind him. Its glowing red eyes locked onto him, and it prepared to strike. Just as he fell toward the wolf, Jaehyeon taunted the creature, asking if it had forgotten something. At that moment, the skeleton appeared between Jaehyeon and the beast, raising its sword with determination. It delivered a powerful strike that severed the werewolf's arm, creating an opening for Jaehyeon to regain his footing. With the opening created, Jaehyeon shouted to the skeleton, urging it to execute the move they had trained for together. His voice was filled with confidence, and he felt ready to finish the fight. The werewolf was taken aback when it saw the two of them rushing toward it at incredible speed. Unable to react in time, Jaehyeon and the skeleton landed their strikes with surgical precision. The beast's body began to tear apart under the force of the double attack, breaking down into multiple small pieces with no resistance. A message appeared confirming the corrupted werewolf had been slain, followed immediately by a notification stating that the slot-on feature had been deactivated. Jaehyeon smiled with satisfaction after the battle, calmly commenting that the result wasn't bad at all for such a fast-paced fight. A quest card appeared, confirming the completion of the Subjugate the Monsters Around the Cave of Bima Cave mission. As a reward, he earned 10 gold coins. Additional notifications flooded the screen, confirming that the skeleton had defeated a powerful monster and that its skill had been upgraded to rank E. They also earned 20,865 gold along with a werewolf skull and werewolf hide. Jaehyeon cheerfully pointed out that the rewards were truly valuable, adding that it felt like all their hard work had paid off. After the battle ended, another message appeared before Jaehyeon. It informed him that he had obtained the rare, corrupted tracker necklace. This item belonged to the unique Chronicle type item class and increased all stats related to classification by 18 points. Jaehyeon was surprised by the item's high rank, considering its non-tradable status. He wondered how something could be non-tradable and still superior to standard unique items. Realizing just how rare it was, he noticed the name Corrupted Tracker on the item, making him pause for a moment. He started wondering if it was connected to what he suspected about the main quest. Immediately afterward, 3 glowing windows appeared, announcing the registration of 3 new titles on his account. The first, Promising Rookie, granted a 3% increase to both intelligence and magic, exactly what he had been aiming for. The second, Challenger of Heroes, boosted his endurance by 3 points, a fitting reward after completing the instant dungeon solo. But what truly took him by surprise was the third title, Corrupted Tracker. He hadn't expected that at all, and it left him genuinely astonished. He confirmed to himself that this title was tied to the first chapter of the main quest line called Corruption Counter, which increased the significance of everything he had just obtained. This main quest line formed the backbone of the Warlord game world, intricately woven into a vast narrative involving central characters and major bosses. Due to the exceptional rewards it offered, every player aspired to take part in it, making it the most sought-after content in the entire game. Jaehyeon recalled his past life, where he had barely reached Chapter 4 of the quest line. Now, however, he had managed to unlock its beginning at a much earlier stage, and the significance of this moment hit him like a wave. He realized that what was happening couldn't simply be luck. A smile crept across his face as he raised his voice, declaring that he had truly found a real treasure. With a contented laugh, he initiated the logout sequence, still in disbelief over his achievements. The scene shifted back to the real world. Breaking news was being broadcast on the screen. Guild Hydra had officially entered the final chapter of the Count Corruption scenario, aiming to complete it within 3 months. Jaehyeon sat silently before the screen, a cup in hand, his face marked by deep contemplation. He wasn't sure whether to feel pride or frustration at the speed of others' progress. Sarcastically, he commented on his own fortune, his frustration evident as he lamented the fact that someone had already reached the final chapter of the quest. If he entered now, there'd be nothing left for him to achieve, and it irked him deeply. He wondered aloud whether he should stop trying for now and instead prepare for the next chapter later on, allowing others to get ahead while he regrouped. But after a brief moment of silence, something sparked within him. A look of inspiration crossed his face, and he suddenly realized something that shifted his whole perspective. The entire world was currently focused on the Count Corruption quest, which was nearing its conclusion. As the first major quest in the game, it occurred to him that releasing a video about it now would go viral, making it a golden marketing opportunity. He began imagining the number of views his video could rack up, picturing himself as a king sitting on a throne, surrounded by wealth and success. Laughing triumphantly, he told himself it was fortunate he had recorded every moment of his gameplay. Now realizing that editing and uploading it immediately to the video platform would be his big break. He added that editing was the key to making the video shine, and he couldn't entrust such an important task to just anyone. It needed someone who knew how to make a video look professional, someone who could take his footage and elevate it. He decided to reach out to someone known in his past life as the god of editing, assuring himself that this was the right person for the job. The scene shifted to a girl with pink hair and glasses, eating noodles while watching something on her phone. She was known as Editor Romani. As she scrolled through her feed, a notification popped up requesting video editing for a dungeon clear video from a player named Hyrkan, listed as level 15. She was initially surprised by the request, laughing sarcastically as she questioned what kind of video a newbie like that could possibly offer after clearing a dungeon. She assumed he was just another rich beginner trying to show off online. But suddenly, her expression shifted. She jumped up from her seat, a gasp escaping her lips, as if she had found something completely unexpected. She leaned toward the screen, her eyes locked on it with intense focus, and whispered to herself that she had found it. Romani, the freelance video editor known by the nickname Hellmouth, was staring at her phone, her face filled with astonishment. She shouted with excitement, clearly elated that she had found her inspiration. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, a woman stood in her luxurious apartment, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape while holding a tablet in her hands. As she calmly observed the view, an employee rushed into the room, addressing her as director and asking if she had called for him. The woman informed him that a new video related to the Count Corruption quest had just been uploaded. She explained that the video was particularly intriguing because it featured a level 15 player defeating a corrupted werewolf alone, an achievement that had never been done before. Shocked, the employee confirmed that their team had reviewed the footage and confirmed that the player's level was indeed low. He suggested that, based on this, there was no immediate need to give the video much attention. On the other hand, the woman admitted, she personally found the video enjoyable. She smiled, confident in her assessment. She said that she wanted this player. With unwavering determination, she added that she wanted him brought to her immediately. At that moment, her identity was revealed. She was Celine Chai, the top figure in the financial world, and the ace of the massive Thunder group in the world of Warlord. However, in the game, she was known as Sir, the Queen of Thunder, the very person who had schemed against Jaehyeon in the previous timeline. Jaehyeon felt a wave of disbelief wash over him as he stared at the post he had uploaded earlier in the day. The view count had surged far beyond his expectations, reaching 6,000 views in just a few short hours. The number left him almost speechless, especially when he remembered how long it had taken him in his previous life to reach a similar milestone. Back then, it had taken months of hard work, consistent uploads, and countless hours to see such numbers. Now, the same achievement had arrived almost effortlessly, and it was all happening so quickly that he could hardly believe it. As Jaehyeon continued to study the post, something else caught his attention. A message had been left by Ramani, the first person to ever reach out to him. Jaehyeon immediately recognized the name, and it surprised him even more. Known for being a reserved and enigmatic figure, Ramani rarely initiated contact with anyone. In fact, in his past life, Ramani had been the type of person who kept to herself, maintaining a mysterious and distant image. For someone like Ramani to reach out first was out of character, and that alone made Jaehyeon feel unsettled. What intrigued him even more was the content of the message. Ramani hadn't simply left a generic comment. She had expressed genuine curiosity about when Jaehyeon would be posting his next video. That was when Jaehyeon realized he didn't have a plan for another video. He hadn't anticipated such attention so soon, and he certainly hadn't thought ahead about future content. His mind raced, and he understood that finding another rare monster like the corrupted werewolf, an enemy that had made his first video so captivating, wouldn't be easy. But as the minutes passed, Jaehyeon began to formulate an idea. Determined to come up with something else worth recording, he set his mind on preparing for the future. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a ranker named Shev was completely absorbed in Jaehyeon's video. He had already replayed it multiple times, each time drawn in by the smoothness and precision of Jaehyeon's movements. There was something mesmerizing about the way Jaehyeon fought, how every action was deliberate and flawless. Shev found it hard to look away, and no matter how many times he watched, he never grew tired of it. As he continued to watch, Shev's gaze shifted to Jaehyeon's face. There was something vaguely familiar about it. He couldn't place where he had seen it before, but the image of Jaehyeon's face kept nagging at him, as though it should trigger some memory. It felt like someone he should know, but the connection remained elusive. Puzzled and slightly uneasy, Shev decided to share the video with Yell. He hoped that maybe someone else could shed some light on the mystery. Yell watched the video with a detached interest, but she didn't seem nearly as affected as Shev. She casually brushed off his concerns, suggesting that perhaps he had simply watched the video too many times. She suggested that was probably why Jaehyeon's face now seemed so familiar to him. Shev considered the possibility, but something about it didn't sit right. There was a detail about Jaehyeon's performance that continued to stand out. Despite being a beginner, Jaehyeon's movements showed no sign of hesitation or awkwardness. They were as fluid and confident as any seasoned fighter. Shev couldn't help but admire this, and he found himself thinking that Jaehyeon was unlike anyone he had ever seen. He even compared him to powerful necromancers and skilled combat experts, thinking that Jaehyeon might truly be a genius. The thought of a duel with Jaehyeon was irresistible to Shev. He longed to test his own skills against someone he regarded as so extraordinary, but he wasn't sure if Jaehyeon would ever agree to such a challenge. As Shev pondered this idea, Yell suddenly interrupted his tirade, reminding him that they had a live video session starting in just a few minutes. She told him he needed to get ready, snapping Shev back to reality. Shev had completely forgotten about the live event. Hearing Yell mention that over 200,000 people had already bought tickets to see his performance jolted him into action. With that number in mind, he quickly resolved to give his fans the best performance he could. As the live stream began, Shev was greeted by the enthusiastic cheers of his fans. Their loud support filled the air as they called out his name, welcoming him with excitement. Shev stood before the dungeon entrance, ready to step through the gate as it materialized in front of him. He had been waiting for this moment, and now the opportunity was finally here. Meanwhile, Jaehyeon was already at the Figus Castle Guild branch, hoping to collect a new quest. However, when he approached the staff, they informed him that no quests were available at that time. Jaehyeon had expected that there might be only a few quests, but he hadn't anticipated that there would be none at all. The news left him feeling disheartened, and he started to entertain the thought that he might need to pause his video-making endeavors due to the situation. Mulling his circumstances at a table, Jaehyeon heard Hotan's greeting, who had emerged from the back. Hotan quickly recognized Jaehyeon as the adventurer who had cleared the dungeon in Baima Mountain. When Jaehyeon heard someone speaking his name, he lifted his head and immediately remembered that Hotan was the one who had given him that quest. Hotan walked over and introduced himself, then asked if Jaehyeon could spare a few minutes for a conversation. Jaehyeon agreed, and Hotan began to explain that he had heard about a mutant being discovered inside the Baima Mountain Cave. Jaehyeon was confused because he didn't recall any quest mentioning a mutant. However, he did recall seeing a werewolf with unusual eyes during his time in the cave. Hotan listened intently, believing Jaehyeon's words without hesitation, and began to wonder aloud if the creature Jaehyeon had encountered was possibly affected by the dark power of the corrupt ones. Still confused, Jaehyeon asked what Hotan meant by corruption. Hotan explained that even the Raiders Association had not yet been able to clearly identify what these corrupted beings really were, but was certain that the strange power emanating from them was the cause of many monsters becoming increasingly wild in recent times. Hotan was convinced that the dark force behind these creatures was the source of much of the chaos spreading across the land, and he warned Jaehyeon that many people may have already fallen victim to this corruption without even realizing it. Given the growing threat, Hotan revealed that the Raiders Association had placed a bounty on the corrupted beings, hoping that brave adventurers would step up to stop them. Before Hotan could finish explaining, Jaehyeon stood up with a determined look in his eyes and reached out, grabbing Hotan's hand. He told Hotan that he wanted to help, and he saw this mission as a hidden quest, one worth pursuing no matter the danger. Although Hotan initially thought it was too soon for someone like Jaehyeon to take on such a perilous task, Jaehyeon's unwavering resolve made it clear that he wasn't going to back down. Seeing this, Hotan reluctantly agreed, deciding to give Jaehyeon a chance based on how well he performed in the future. Hotan then spoke of a person named Ahimbri, who resided in Bangsu Castle, the eastern counterpart of Figus Castle. He explained that Ahimbri was the perfect person to train Jaehyeon, to prepare him for the real dangers that lay ahead. Hotan promised to write Jaehyeon a letter of recommendation, which he could present to Ahimbri. Once Ahimbri received the letter, he was expected to give Jaehyeon a rare skill book to aid in his training and growth. Without wasting any time, Hotan wrote the letter and handed it to Jaehyeon. As soon as Jaehyeon received it, a surge of joy filled him. His heart raced with excitement. Without a moment's hesitation, he rushed out of the building, overwhelmed by the opportunity that lay ahead. He could hardly believe what was happening. The thought of becoming Ahimbri's student was almost surreal. Ahimbri wasn't just any teacher. He was one of the 7 disciples of the great mage Boken, a figure highly respected in the world of magic, known for his expertise and for providing rare and powerful skill books. Ahimbri was an NPC that many mages could only dream of meeting. Jaehyeon knew that receiving training from Ahimbri would be an incredible honor, and he could feel his future in magic starting to take shape. Jaehyeon thought to himself that with proper training under Ahimbri, he would no longer need to worry about finding enough material for his future videos. This new path could be the key to everything changing for him, offering more opportunities and content than he had ever imagined. As he ran toward Bangsu Castle, eager to meet Ahimbri, a sudden realization hit him. There was something important he had to do first. He quickly stopped in his tracks and changed his course, heading to a quiet spot where he could focus. Once in a secluded area, Jaehyeon summoned his skeleton shard skill, which he had neglected to check after his last major battle. He had received some rewards from that fight, and one of them was a special skill that he hadn't sold. This skill had come from the werewolf with the strange eyes, and Jaehyeon was eager to put it to use. He decided to apply the skill to the skeleton fragment. As soon as he did, the system notified him that the skeleton warrior had gained the special trait of werewolf toughness, making it considerably stronger and more durable in battle. Next, Jaehyeon pulled out another item from his inventory, the necklace of the corrupted tracker. Rather than using it on another creature, as he had originally planned, he decided to equip it himself. Immediately, his stats increased, including his strength, agility, and various other class-related attributes. With that, he felt prepared and confident, knowing that he had completed the necessary preparations. But Jaehyeon wasn't done yet. He cast another skeleton shard through two other identical copies. He gave each one specific instructions. Always fight together as a team in battle, and work in harmony without any internal conflict. Satisfied with his orders, he was about to leave when he wondered about the kind of monsters spawned nearby. From the dense forest, a level 25 forest bear suddenly lunged at Jaehyeon, its massive form crashing toward him with surprising speed. Jaehyeon managed to dodge just in time, but his brief moment of relief was cut short as the bear became more agitated, its aggression escalating. Realizing this, Jaehyeon quickly signaled one of his skeletons to retaliate. The skeleton rushed in for an assault, moving with speed, but the forest bear reacted swiftly. With a powerful swipe of its claws, it sent the skeleton flying, crashing to the ground in a heap. Watching this, Jaehyeon's frustration mounted. He had expected more from the skeleton, and internally, he scolded it for making such a direct, obvious attack. He had given clear instructions to approach from the bear's blind spot, not to charge head-on. Without wasting any time, Jaehyeon issued another command to a different skeleton. This one charged at the bear as well, but the result was the same. Once again, the bear reacted with a swift and powerful strike, sending the second skeleton tumbling to the ground, just like the first. Jaehyeon's irritation deepened. He had given explicit instructions, yet the second skeleton had failed to learn from the first. He could hardly believe that both had made the same mistake. The third skeleton, however, stepped forward with an air of overconfidence, seemingly believing it could succeed where the others had failed. Jaehyeon watched with a sliver of hope, hoping this one might prove different, but the outcome was no better. The skeleton lunged at the bear, but the bear's claws struck it down with ease, just as it had with the others. Jaehyeon was left even more frustrated than before. Later, the three skeletons knelt before Jaehyeon, each holding its skull in its hands as if ashamed of their failures. With a sigh, Jaehyeon gestured for them to place their skulls back onto their spine. He took a moment to lecture them, explaining in simple terms that when a monster is attacked, it naturally turns toward the direction of the attack. That's why they needed to approach from the bear's blind spot, not head-on, where it could easily see them coming. Yet, none of the skeletons able to understand Jaehyeon's explanation. As Jaehyeon reflected on the situation, he remembered the effect of the necklace of the corrupted tracker. His skill rank had increased, and he now had the ability to summon 3 skeletons at once instead of just one. This newfound power gave him a sense of progress, though he knew there was still much to learn. Despite the advantage of having 3 skeletons, a new problem has surfaced for Jaehyeon. They still cannot function as a cohesive team. Though they share the knowledge he imparts, they lack an understanding of teamwork and how to coordinate effectively in battle. Worse yet, maintaining all 3 skeletons costs him 3 times the mana, and their performance is subpar, far worse than the original skeleton. Jaehyeon feels disappointed by the outcome. However, there is a small victory. He has reached level 20, just as he had planned. With that milestone achieved, he briefly considers taking a break from making combat videos. Yet, he knows he can't afford to rest just yet. Jaehyeon then orders the skeletons to stand up. They will continue training until they reach Bangsu Castle. He had originally hoped that he could leave the fighting to his summoned minions and enjoy a more relaxed lifestyle, the kind that most necromancers dream of. But the reality is much different. He understands now that, at least for the time being, he must remain on the front lines, directly involved in the battles himself. Meanwhile, inside the Bangsu Castle branch of the Raiders Association, The atmosphere is chaotic. The building is filled with raiders, each one eagerly awaiting the chance to take on their next challenge. When a lone raider emerges from one of the main hallways, the crowd immediately swarms him. Dozens rush toward him at once, hungry to learn what quest he has been given. The energy in the room is frantic, as if they are desperate to snatch up whatever scraps of quest they can find. Jaehyeon stands off to the side, silently observing the scene. To him, the raiders resemble hyenas fighting over a carcass, desperate and greedy. He finds their behavior pathetic, especially since many of them seem to rely on others to do the work for them, rather than putting in any effort themselves. With little interest, Jaehyeon ignored the chaos and heads for the staircase. As he begins to ascend, one of the raiders approaches him, trying to strike up a conversation. Jaehyeon shuts him down immediately with a cold response, knowing that he must keep his true intentions hidden, especially the fact that he is there for the Ahimbri quest. This is a hidden quest, and if anyone were to find out, they might try to interfere. To avoid drawing any more attention, Jaehyeon pulls out a sealed letter as he climbs the stairs. He hands it to a staff on duty, explaining that he has a letter of recommendation from Hotan. The raider reads the letter briefly, nods in recognition, and directs Jaehyeon to proceed to the second floor. Without hesitation, Jaehyeon moves forward, even as other raiders begin shoving and pushing behind him, shouting that they want to join his party. The staff quickly intervenes, blocking them from following. As Jaehyeon walks toward the designated room, his thoughts shift to the potential rewards of the hidden quest. He wonders if Ahimbri, the one who will train him, has something truly valuable to offer. His hope is to establish a lasting connection with Ahimbri, someone who could become a powerful ally in the future. But when he opens the door to Ahimbri's office, he is stunned by what he finds. The room is a complete mess. Piles of books, scrolls, documents, and strange magical items are scattered across every surface. Dust fills the air, and the only sign of life is a figure slumped behind a mountain of books. Ahimbri is asleep, half buried beneath the weight of his own research. As Jaehyeon steps inside, the noise of the door opening stirs Ahimbri awake. Confused and disoriented, Ahimbri looks up and mutters that he doesn't recall having any appointment scheduled for the day. Jaehyeon introduces himself calmly, using his game name, Hyrkan, and presents the letter of recommendation from Hotan. Ahimbri lazily takes the letter, reads it over, and raises an eyebrow. He comments that Jaehyeon still looks like a trainee black mage, but supposes there must be some skill involved if Hotan went through the trouble of sending him. Jaehyeon gives a short and modest response, claiming that he simply got lucky. His primary concern at the moment is receiving the reward. Ahimbri eventually hands over the promised rewards, and as soon as Jaehyeon takes them, the system interface responds with a notification. Jaehyeon stands in stunned silence, watching the screen as it displays the rewards: a skill book titled Bone Armor and another titled Madness Helm. Both items emit a faint glow, marking them as rare and possibly high-tier skills. Jaehyeon stands frozen, hardly able to believe that not one, but two valuable skill books were handed to him so easily. His mind races, overwhelmed by how significant this reward is for a single hidden quest. As he stares in disbelief, Ahimbri casually remarks that their business is finished. The system interface follows with a confirmation. The teachings of Ahimbri quest has been completed. Jaehyeon, still recovering from the surprise, finds it hard to process how abruptly the quest has ended. He had expected a longer series of tasks, or at least a continuation, but instead, he's already being dismissed. The books around the room begin to move and block Jaehyeon for following, subtly guiding Jaehyeon toward the exit. Desperate not to let this opportunity slip away, Jaehyeon shouts out, offering that he's willing to do anything. He hopes his words will buy him another chance to deepen his relationship with Ahimbri. Just as he is about to be pushed out of the room, Ahimbri reaches out and grasps his hand firmly. A strange smile appears on his face, one that mixes amusement and mischief. With a low voice, he asks if Jaehyeon truly means that. At that moment, the system interface pops up once again. A new quest appears, titled Bring the Egg from the Nest. The description is brief and vague, but most notably, it clearly states that there will be no reward for completing the task. That's when Jaehyeon realizes it. He's been tricked. Ahimri had deliberately baited him into accepting another task, using his own eagerness against him, without even knowing the risks or the full details. Meanwhile, outside the Raiders Association, a heavily armored raider clad in a full set of heavy iron gear walked through the street with a calm but deliberate step. His presence draws the attention of passers-by. As he stops in front of the building, he mutters to himself that this must be the place where the man who wore the Hahom mask was. Jaehyeon felt utterly dejected after realizing he had been scammed by an NPC. He had thought that a Himbri would give him a quest tied to the main storyline, and the fact that the quest offered no reward only deepened his frustration. He couldn't help but feel betrayed, believing that he was being misled. As he muttered about his bad luck, one of the nearby raiders overheard his comment, and, together with several others, they charged toward him. Completely caught off guard, Jaehyeon hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Before he could do anything, an armored knight appeared in front of him, standing between him and pushing the raiders off. The knight spoke calmly, stating that he wanted to talk to Jaehyeon somewhere quiet. Jaehyeon didn't recognize the man, and, instinctively, he prepared to refuse. However, when the knight suddenly addressed him as Mr. Hahom Mask, Jaehyeon's expression turned serious, and his posture stiffened. This was no ordinary encounter. Later, in a quiet alley, the two stood face to face. The armored knight apologized for the earlier disturbance, explaining that he hadn't thought they could talk properly with so many people around. He slowly pressed his war watch to remove his helmet, revealing his face. Jaehyeon's eyes studied the man's gear, recognizing the high level of craftsmanship. This knight was no ordinary player. He was at least a ranker. Still, Jaehyeon couldn't place him in his memory, and a sense of unease settled in. Who was this man, and how did he know about him? The knight then asked if Jaehyeon was Hahom Mask. Choosing to play ignorant, Jaehyeon claimed that he had followed the knight out here simply because he wanted to talk and that he didn't know who Hahom Mask was. The knight seemed unfazed by the response, but he then asked if Jaehyeon had received a quest from an NPC named a Himbri. In response, Jaehyeon challenged him, asking why he should share any information. He even dared the knight, provoking him by suggesting that if the man was so confident, he could risk his account and kill him. Jaehyeon acted this way to test the knight's reaction, to see how far he was willing to go for information. After a brief pause, the knight surprised Jaehyeon by suddenly bowing deeply and extending his hand, offering a handshake. He seemed regretful and apologized for his earlier behavior. Though still cautious, Jaehyeon accepted the handshake, signaling that he would let the matter go this time. Without another word, Jaehyeon turned to leave, but the armored knight stayed still, watching him with an unreadable expression. A few moments later, another figure emerged from the shadows. This new figure, a woman who had been watching from a distance, stated that she didn't believe Jaehyeon was the person they were looking for. The armored knight agreed, noting that Jaehyeon clearly lacked the skills of a top-level player. He added that if one had been playing Warlord for any significant period of time, one would never have made the mistake of carelessly stretching out his arm with his war watch so visibly exposed. As he spoke, the knight wiped his palm with a handkerchief, his face reflecting disgust. The woman in the shadows then spoke about their surveillance of a Himbri, mentioning that the Corrupt Count quest was nearing completion. Even if their involvement were discovered now, there would be no consequences. However, the armored knight disagreed, emphasizing that the Egg of the Nest quest was part of the main storyline. This made the quest a significant risk, and the knight believed they couldn't afford to take any unnecessary chances. With that, the woman in the shadows said she would return to her position. Though still vigilant, quietly bid her farewell, the armored knight planning to meet her again later. As the woman disappeared into the darkness, Jaehyeon realized that he had never been with the armored knight or the woman in the shadows. Instead, he had been watching them from the window of a nearby building. Hidden against the wall, Jaehyeon's eyes narrowed as he studied their body language and listened to their words. The more he observed, the clearer it became. They were part of an organized group, an organization far more dangerous and secretive than he had initially realized. Their coordination, the way they communicated without the need for full explanations, was all the evidence Jaehyeon needed to understand that this was no coincidence. Jaehyeon silently observes that if the individuals had belonged to a typical player guild, they would have properly introduced themselves or at least attempted some form of negotiation when they assumed him for Haho Mask. Instead, they remained vague and suspicious, which alone indicated that they were not ordinary players. They were concealing something likely associated with a more secretive and dangerous group. Although Jaehyeon did not know their true identities, one thing was certain. They were far from average. Later, Jaehyeon was seen far from the city, deep within a quiet forest. He sat alone on top of a tree stump, lost in thought. His summoned skeletons moved through the drills he had set for them, the clacking of bones and the soft rustling of grass filling the silence. Despite his undead companions continuing their routines, Jaehyeon's mind remained focused on the event from earlier. He recalled the nest egg quest from a Himbri. Initially, it had seemed trivial or unrelated, but now he understood it better. There was something deeper at play, something that both the armored knight and the woman in the shadows knew. It became apparent to him that they must have seen his video, specifically the one where he, as Haho Mask, interacted with the corrupted wolf. That was likely how they tracked him. However, the fact that they had let him go without confirming his identity or attempting to stop him unsettled him. This could only mean one thing. They weren't concerned with who Haho Mask truly was. They were more interested in the quest itself. He couldn't help but feel a growing unease at this realization. Jaehyeon muttered to himself, his voice low and bitter. He couldn't fully comprehend the nature of his strange quest, but something told him that continuing down this path would only lead to further encounters with these mysterious individuals. It seemed as though they were always just one step behind him, waiting for him to make a move. The more he thought about it, the more it unsettled him. He even began to consider stopping his video uploads for a while, at least until he could figure out exactly what he was dealing with. The last thing he needed was to make himself an even bigger target. His frustration grew as he muttered again, wondering why his life seemed to be constantly entangled with such insane individuals. One problem after another, it felt like nothing ever stopped. Meanwhile, far from the forest, Jaehyeon emerged from her high-tech gaming pod. The chamber opened with a faint hiss, bathing the room in soft light. Her secretary, Park Suji, greeted her immediately, handing her a bottle of water while complimenting her on her hard work. Suji's eyes shone with admiration, but Jaehyeon only seemed distant. She took the bottle of water without enthusiasm, her expression cold and indifferent. When Suji asked how the guild entrance exam had gone, Jaehyeon responded casually, stating that the entire test had been a waste of time. She found every applicant to be useless, and none of them had met her expectations. Her mood darkened as she sat down, irritation growing as she tapped her fingers restlessly against the armrest. She then turned her focus to Suji, her sharp eyes narrowing as she asked if there had been any updates on Haho Mask, the masked player she had tasked her to investigate. Suji hesitated for a moment before responding, stating that it seemed like the person might have joined another guild. However, there had been no further responses or movement since then. Jaehyeon's expression immediately became sharp, her mood shifting into something far more dangerous. A cold, suffocating pressure filled the room, and Suji became visibly nervous. She quickly added that she would investigate further and bring back confirmed information as soon as possible. Jaehyeon gave a curt nod, standing up without looking at Suji. She brushed past her and spoke in a low, firm voice, instructing Suji not to return until she had something concrete. Just before leaving, Jaehyeon paused, turning back slightly to ask what the president had said about the ongoing situation. Suji swallowed nervously, her voice trembling as she informed Jaehyeon that the president had not said anything yet. Upon hearing this, Jaehyeon stood motionless, her gaze narrowing slightly. Her voice, when it came, was calm but laced with cold sarcasm. She remarked that the president's silence wasn't because he approved of her actions, but because Warlord, the game, was performing exceptionally well at the moment. She reminded Suji of how, when she had first expressed interest in playing the game, the president had tried to arrange a marriage for her without her consent, as though her future and value had no regard for her own will. His silence now was not approval's profit-driven patience. She was not fooled by this. She understood the game he was playing. It was clear to her that the president's silence was a reflection of his interest in the game's success, not her actions. She knew well that he would never support her unless it was beneficial to him. Without allowing further discussion, Jaehyeon gave Suji a new order. She instructed her to gather a completely fresh batch of applicants and report back to her by the next morning. The order was abrupt and left no room for negotiation. Suji's face drained of color at the impossible deadline, her eyes widening with shock. Her lips parted as if to protest, but she quickly caught herself, muttering under her breath, barely audible, that Jaehyeon really did have a terrible personality. Suji could feel the weight of Jaehyeon's words pressing down on her. It was always like this. There was no room for defiance or hesitation in Jaehyeon's world, only cold, calculating demands. Meanwhile, Jaehyeon arrived at the lizard swamp with his skeleton warriors in tow. His thoughts turned to a Himbri, who was now at Bangsu Castle, and he guessed that the quest must be close by. The quest was about finding an egg, and he figured the monster involved would likely be a bird, reptile, or insect type. Given his current level and abilities, the only place he could explore safely was the lizard swamp. He called one of his skeletons to remind it, to be mindful that the monsters in this area were known to be particularly strong and unpredictable. To prepare himself, he decided to use the skill he had learned earlier, Madness Helm. As he activated the skill, the skeleton's eye sockets glowed red, and a violent red aura began to emanate from it. Jaehyeon was surprised by how powerful the effect appeared. The skill had an intimidating presence, more so than he had anticipated. Curious about its full potential, he decided to test it by ordering the skeleton to attack him. But there was a risk involved. The skill might push the summon into a berserk state, losing all control. He issued a mental command, expecting the skeleton to obey with its usual mechanical precision. However, instead of responding with discipline, the creature began to convulse, its movements becoming erratic and wild. It erupted into a frenzy, behaving in a way that was both unnatural and unsettling. Reacting swiftly, Jaehyeon delivered a heavy punch that connected solidly with the skeleton's skull. The force of the blow sent it hurtling into the sky, before it landed like a ball nearby. Unfazed, Jaehyeon studied the aftermath with narrowed eyes. The berserk behavior seemed like an unintended consequence of the summoning system, or perhaps a flaw in the skill itself. The enhancement had failed to deliver the expected results, and the instability only reinforced his skepticism. A sense of dissatisfaction lingered as he wondered if the skill was more of a trap than an asset. Before he could reflect further, movement stirred behind him. From the thick mists of the swamp, a few figures emerged. A lizard man, towering and reptilian, stepping out of the muck with a guttural growl. Its scaled body glistened with moisture, and its claws flexed in anticipation of the fight. The creature's predatory gaze locked onto Jaehyeon, who acknowledged its presence with a calm glance. Seeing the lizard man as a perfect opportunity to test his newly enhanced skeletons, he extended his hand and began channeling magical energy into the remaining warriors. The enhancement spell took hold, red energy pulsing through their frames, filling them with newfound strength and aggression. A second spell, Bone Armor, activated, causing jagged bone plating to wrap around their forms, reinforcing their fragile structures with a defensive layer. With the transformation complete, Jaehyeon commanded the skeletal warriors to engage the enemy. They charged forward, their movements erratic but purposeful. Without hesitation, they descended upon the lizard man, unleashing a torrent of violent blows, their swords striking with brutal force. The air was thick with the sounds of the battle as the lizard man tried to retaliate, its claws slashing at the skeletons. However, the enhanced warriors pressed on, their relentless attacks overwhelming the creature. The battle intensified as the lizard men struggled to maintain its ground against the skeletal onslaught. Jaehyeon watched the scene unfold, his focus unwavering. This was exactly the kind of test he had been hoping for, a true challenge to see how effective his summons were under real combat conditions. The outcome of this fight would tell him whether his efforts had truly paid off or if there were still flaws in his strategy. The sound of cracking bones and tearing flesh echoed across the swamp as the skeletal fighters relentlessly overpowered their foes. Despite the chaos, their assault remained unwavering. Within minutes, 3 lizard men lay motionless in the muck, their bodies broken under the ferocity of the attack. A surge of energy rushed through Jaehyeon, and a notification confirmed his level up. The increase in strength reinvigorated his focus, solidifying his determination. He resolved to continue the hunt throughout the coming week, scouring the swamp in search of the elusive egg. If this region proved to be unrelated to the quest, he planned to relocate without hesitation, driven by the same relentless resolve that he expected from his summoned warriors. Unseen by Jaehyeon, a pair of observant eyes watched from a distance. Perched on a moss-covered rock, a female player observed the scene unfolding before her. Known as Ilya, she was recognized not only for her beauty, but also for her ability to manipulate those around her with ease. Throughout her life, she had moved with confidence, accustomed to admiration and assistance that required little effort. The illusion of control had shaped her experience, and she rarely encountered resistance. However, fate chose an inconvenient moment to humble her. As she shifted to get a better view, her foot slipped on the slick terrain. She lost her balance and fell face first into a shallow puddle of swamp water. Muck splashed across her figure, coating her carefully maintained appearance in grime. Rising slowly, Ilya's frustration mounted as she saw the filth clinging to her in thick layers. Her disdain for the environment deepened, and resentment lingered in her eyes as she took in the surroundings, now more miserable than before. Ilya's presence in the lizard man-infested swamp was the result of another's failure. One of her subordinates, a self-proclaimed slave who had insisted on escorting her to this region to level up, had died almost immediately after they arrived. His incompetence had cost him his life. Now, Ilya found herself stranded in a hostile environment far beyond her current capabilities. Her eyes soon landed on Jaehyeon, who stood out not just for his combat efficiency, but for his composure and strength. The skeletal warriors at his side obeyed his commands without question, and his expression remained calm even in the midst of violence. Ilya saw in him the perfect candidate for her next act. In her mind, he became a new potential tool, just another player to manipulate. She approached him with a practiced limp, clutching her leg with a pained expression. Her posture was fragile, her demeanor submissive, and she projected the image of a wounded beauty in desperate need of help. Confident that no man would turn down such a figure, especially not one like her, Ilya was sure that her charm would win him over. However, Jaehyeon didn't even spare her a glance. Without a word or gesture of acknowledgement, he calmly turned and walked away. His indifference cut deeper than any rejection she had ever received before. Ilya froze, disbelief taking hold. Her gaped open in shock as she tried to make sense of the moment. When the realization finally settled in, that she had been completely ignored, her expression shifted. Anger simmered beneath the surface. She bit her lower lip in frustration, barely restraining the urge to lash out. How could someone, especially someone like him, simply disregard her so easily? Meanwhile, Jaehyeon continued his progress through the region, killing more monsters with his skeletal warriors. His mind remained focused on the hunt, undistracted by the brief encounter with Ilya. The swamp was proving to be more dangerous than he had anticipated, but he remained resolute in his task. He would not stop until he found the egg or determined that the quest led elsewhere. No matter how far he travels, however Ilya persists. She follows him at a distance, still limping and clutching at her supposed injury. Her performance remains unwavering, but Jaehyeon's patience is beginning to wear thin. He is far from oblivious to her presence. In fact, her continued shadowing, despite being clearly ignored, is starting to grate on him. This is a game, he thinks, and she should be playing it properly. Instead, she clings to the outdated belief that someone else will carry her forward, that her mere presence should be enough to draw assistance. His silence has been a form of resistance, a refusal to entertain such laziness. But her persistence is leaving him with no choice. The delay she causes is beginning to act as an obstacle to his progress. Eventually, he halts and turns toward her, his eyes narrowing. He demands to know what she actually wants. Caught off guard by the sudden attention, Ilya softens her posture. Her voice is quiet, fragile as she claims to have dropped her sword in a nearby swamp pit while trying to hunt. The story is simple but crafted carefully to invoke sympathy without appearing too dependent. She insists that she cannot retrieve it herself and needs his help. Jaehyeon agrees coldly, without ceremony. He informs her that once the weapon is retrieved, she is to leave him alone. His tone carries no warmth, no hint of kindness. However, Ilya masks her satisfaction behind a sweet smile and a breathy gratefulness. Internally, her thoughts are triumphant. To her, this small victory is enough. She believes she has broken through his cold exterior, manipulating the situation to her advantage. Soon, Jaehyeon and Ilya arrive at the swamp where her lost sword is supposedly located. Without wasting time, Jaehyeon issues a command to his skeleton warriors. They immediately move forward, stepping into the sludge with jerky precision, toward the sword embedded into the ground. As Ilya begins to express her gratitude in soft tones, her expression shifts ever so subtly. Behind her smile, a calculating thought takes shape. She reasons that necromancers are only as dangerous as their summons. And once separated from them, they are fragile, vulnerable. This belief emboldens her. Without warning, Ilya lunges forward to strike Jaehyeon, while his attention appears to be elsewhere. However, her attack is embarrassingly slow. Before she can even get close, Jaehyeon reacts. In one smooth motion, he grabs her wrist, halts the swing, and hurls her effortlessly into the same swamp from which her sword had been retrieved. The splash is loud and messy, and Ilya's surface is drenched, sputtering, and furious. Her voice trembles with rage as she declares that he won't get away with this, that her elite bodyguards will arrive soon and reduce him to ashes. Jaehyeon laughed as he mocked her, before lazily pointing behind her. Confused and disoriented, Ilya turns her head, only to find several lizard men emerging from the thickets of vines and muck. Their eyes glint with hostile intent, and their low growls vibrate through the humid air. Ilya screams, scrambling to gain footing in the slippery swamp. As the monsters begin closing in, Jaehyeon watches with detached amusement. He remarks that if she intended to scam someone, she should at least have tried harder. Her act had been transparent from the start. With a final glance, he orders his skeletons to move out, muttering that she had wasted enough of his time. As the group prepares to leave, Jaehyeon notices something unusual. The skeletons lag behind as one of them gestured weirdly, its postures oddly expressive. It almost seems as if it is practicing charm techniques, gestures and poses that mimic those often associated with seductive magic. Jaehyeon beats them up in irritation and barks at them to stop learning unnecessary, strange things. He warns them that he will personally destroy them if they continue down this path. Moments later, a notification flashes across his view. It informs him that Ilya has died. Curiously, he also receives assist points for her death. Despite not having dealt the killing blow himself, he raises an eyebrow, but doesn't delve too deeply into the matter. The swamp monsters had simply finished what he hadn't cared to start. As for her claims about bodyguards, he dismisses them with ease. A person like her, he reasons, is all bark and no bite. For him, the threat was hollow. What Jaehyeon doesn't realize, however, is that a group of well-armed players are watching the entire sequence unfold through a shared recording feature. These are the very fans Ilya spoke of, her actual love slaves, scattered across different regions in attempt to follow her until they got the video. Their faces remain unreadable as they replay the footage of Jaehyeon commanding his skeletons. The group observes in silence, their expressions betraying nothing, yet their intentions are clear. Deep within the dense forest, Jaehyeon stood over a man who knelt helplessly before him, his sword deeply embedded in the man's chest. This man was revealed to be one of Ilya's former slaves, still murmuring in a barely coherent voice about taking revenge on her behalf. Irritated and confused by the man's persistence, Jaehyeon questioned aloud why someone would go to such extremes for Ilya. He wondered what the man hoped to achieve. Perhaps he believed that avenging Ilya would earn her favor or affection. The man responded with a wild, hysterical laugh, his eyes wide and filled with a dangerous obsession as he declared his love for Ilya. Without hesitation, Jaehyeon delivered the killing blow. His mind flashed back to how full of red flags Ilya was. She had repeatedly attempted to manipulate him, which was the very reason he had severed ties with her. He had never taken her warnings seriously, especially those about her bodyguards seeking him out. But now, it was clear she had not been bluffing at all. Ilya played the victim masterfully, stirring up her loyal fans with her performance. Because of this act, Jaehyeon found himself confronted daily by her devoted followers, growing more and more frustrated with each encounter. Not only was he anxious from his inability to find new quests, but now a relentless pack of obsessed fans was actively hunting him down. For a fleeting moment, he considered seeking out Ilya to finish her off once and for all, but quickly dismissed the dangerous idea, realizing it would only land him in deeper trouble. At that instant, he gathered the loot from his defeated opponent. The system interface flickered to life, displaying his rewards: an ownerless war watch, 5,000 gold, goblin leather boots, and a rare necklace known as the Necklace of Promise. Jaehyeon recalled that this necklace could be sold for a hefty sum of 800,000 won. Both he and his loyal skeleton companion felt a surge of excitement. For the first time in a while, it seemed possible to afford a fancy dinner that night. Just then, another of Ilya's fanatics spotted Jaehyeon. Seizing the opportunity to provoke, Jaehyeon boldly took responsibility for killing Ilya, hoping to draw the lone opponent into a quick and manageable fight. However, his confidence quickly waned when dozens of hostile figures emerged from the trees, armed and radiating dangerous intent. The smug expression on his face hardened into alarm as the full gravity of the situation became clear. He and his skeleton companion immediately turned and fled, the angry mob surging after them with relentless determination. As he ran, Jaehyeon was overwhelmed by disbelief and frustration. He had never imagined so many would be so deeply obsessed with Ilya, enough to form what looked like a small army. Hoping to slow their pursuit, he ordered his skeletons to intercept the attackers. But his brief glimmer of hope vanished when one enemy effortlessly shattered his summoned skeletons with a single powerful strike. In that moment, Jaehyeon realized the harsh truth. These were not merely emotional fanatics, but experienced high-level players, and there were far too many of them. Knowing that a direct confrontation would be suicide, he sprinted deeper into the forest, his thoughts consumed entirely by survival. Eventually, Jaehyeon stopped in a remote part of the deep forest, breath ragged and chest heaving. His body ached, but his mind raced even faster. It was proving nearly impossible to shake off the persistent group chasing him. Not only because of their determination, but because he was simply too underleveled in comparison. Running only delayed the inevitable. Despite his exhaustion, he forced himself onward, hoping that distance or an environmental advantage might save him. After several minutes, he began to realize something was wrong. The area he had stumbled into did not resemble any part of the lizard swamp he remembered. The trees here were taller and seemed to look older, the fog thicker, and the usual sounds of wildlife eerily muted. Despite spending days exploring this region thoroughly, combing through every corner in search of quests or loot, he had never seen this area before. A flicker of realization crossed his face as he finally understood that he had crossed into a hidden or previously inaccessible section of the map. Meanwhile, The group pursuing him arrived nearby, their eyes sharply scanning the dense surroundings for any sign of their target. One of them soon spotted Jaehyeon skeletons standing ahead in a small clearing. Instead of engaging in combat or fleeing, the skeletons performed awkward, eerie dance that seemed to mock the pursuers' efforts. The hunters came to an immediate halt, confused and momentarily speechless. Then, overcome with rage, one of them interpreted the display as a personal insult and charged forward, sword raised, ready to destroy the mocking summoned warriors. However, as he crossed the clearing, the swarm's surface erupted beneath him, and before he could react, an enormous, thick tongue suddenly lashed out from the shadows and grabbed him with swift movements. In an instant, he was yanked into the creature's mouth. The remaining pursuers froze in horror as a monstrous creature slithered into view, towering, scaled, and exuding a suffocating, oppressive presence. Recognition dawned on one of the hunters, who stammered out the name of the beast. A dragon lizard with level 40, the boss monster of the lizard swamp. Jaehyeon remained hidden behind a large tree, watching the terrifying scene unfold. He had never imagined this part of the map would turn out to be the lair of the dragon lizard. The dragon lizard was notorious as a powerful boss monster, famed for its extremely high defense, massive health pool, and deadly, devastating attacks. Usually, defeating it required a full party of around 20 players, all near level 40, battling with great difficulty. From what Jaehyeon had heard before arriving here, the raid on the dragon lizard had already been completed some time ago, so the boss monster was not expected to still be present in this field. However, if someone involved in a related quest stepped into the area, the dragon lizard would respawn, triggered by the presence of such a player. Jaehyeon grew certain this location was the intended place for the quest given by a Himbri. As he stayed hidden, his thoughts lingered on how a Himbri had sent him to complete this dangerous mission, one involving defeating such a terrifying creature and retrieving its egg. Despite being only a level 20 player, the mission frustrated and irritated him, especially given a Himbri's high expectations. Fortunately, the situation had allowed Jaehyeon to gather a few capable cannon fodders, offering hope that the mission might yet succeed. Meanwhile, one among the fodders suggested to the others that the dragon lizard was simply too strong, recommending retreat. But Jaehyeon was determined not to allow that. He quickly activated his enhancement skill to strengthen his summoned skeletons and ordered them to block the path, preventing any chance of escape. Not long afterward, the dragon lizard struck again, taking down one of Jaehyeon's allies. In the confusion, Jaehyeon seized the opportunity to break into a run, but the others quickly spotted him and began chasing. Using the distraction to his advantage, Jaehyeon rushed into the now-empty nest, hoping to locate the dragon lizard's egg. However, upon reaching the center of the nest, there was no egg in sight. He scanned the area carefully and eventually discovered a strange-looking stone marked with a purple symbol on its surface. It did not resemble an egg, but looked more like a mysterious artifact. Yet something about it drew his attention. At that very moment, a system notification informed him that one of his skeleton summons had been destroyed. He immediately realized that the dragon lizard must be returning after detecting an intruder. Jaehyeon knew he was out of time and had no chance to continue searching. Still hiding behind a tree near the nest, he watched as the dragon lizard re-emerged and let out a loud, piercing howl. Certain that he could no longer search the nest for the dragon lizard's egg, Jaehyeon decided he had no other option but to take the strange stone marked with purple, even though it was clearly not an egg, and bring it back to a Himbri. All the cannon fodders were now lying defeated across the swamp, their bodies scattered and motionless. Jaehyeon walked calmly toward one of them, a player who appeared to be on the verge of death. He looked down at the weakened figure, his expression unreadable, silently pondering how Warlord was such an interesting game filled with all kinds of strange people, players who acted bold and reckless, driven by the massive rewards at stake. Without hesitation, Jaehyeon bent down and picked up the opponent's war watch, which had become ownerless due to the defeat. The fallen player tried to muster strength to respond, but Jaehyeon drew his sword and drove it forcefully into the ground. His tone grew cold and serious as he made it clear that until now, he had been playing along with them as if everything were a game or a joke. But in truth, there was much at stake in this world for him. He warned that if they ever bothered him again, There would be no mercy or leniency for them. This warning was not just for them, but also for Ilya, the one connected to their group. After delivering this message, Jaehyeon stepped carefully onto the fallen bodies, using them as support to cross the swamp without sinking into the thick, sticky mud beneath. As he walked away, he thought more seriously about the consequences. If they came after him again, even after this clear warning, it would no longer be a small skirmish but an all-out war. With this in mind, he contacted the Bangsu Guild calmly, claiming to have spotted the dragon lizard within the lizard swamp. He offered to sell the exact location of the boss monster for 100,000 gold, fully aware that this kind of information was extremely valuable to high-level guilds. Later, Jaehyeon arrived at a Himbri's office, delivering the strange purple-marked stone. His steps were tense and cautious, filled with hope that this was the correct item since he did not want to search the vast map all over again. A Himbri took the stone and examined it closely, his expression unreadable for a long moment. Finally, after an uncomfortable silence stretched, a Himbri confirmed that this was exactly the item he had been looking for. Jaehyeon felt a wave of relief and excitement rush over him, the pressure lifting from his shoulders. Still holding the stone, a Himbri commented that Jaehyeon was faster than expected, admitting that he had thought it would take someone like Jaehyeon much longer to complete the task. Jaehyeon nearly lost his temper at the comment, his frustration bubbling up, but he forced himself to remain calm. With a composed expression, he responded that he had given everything he had. Without wasting any time, he asked a Himbri to assign him the next quest. A Himbri looked at Jaehyeon seriously and began explaining the true nature of the item he had brought. He asked if Jaehyeon was aware of what he had delivered, and then revealed that in every investigation of areas where mutated monsters had appeared, this strange item was always found nearby. Because of this recurring pattern, he had temporarily named it the Corruption Stone. As Jaehyeon listened carefully, a realization dawned on him. This must have been the reason those mysterious players were approaching him earlier. The Corruption Stone was clearly an important item tied to the main quest line, and those players wanted to ensure no outsider could interfere with its influence on the progression of the story. At first, Jaehyeon had believed that the quest from a Himbri was a scam, just another time waster. But now he understood it was connected to something far more significant. It was not a side mission, but an essential part of the main quest. A Himbri offered a sincere apology, openly admitting that he was aware the task was far too difficult for someone like Jaehyeon to handle alone. Yet, with their entire world currently threatened by an unknown and overwhelmingly powerful enemy, he explained that testing Jaehyeon's determination and willpower was a necessary step before entrusting him with any greater responsibility or mission. Speaking with a tone that was noticeably more serious than before, a Himbri asked if Jaehyeon felt prepared to face the relentless force known only as corruption. Feeling the full weight of this golden opportunity before him, Jaehyeon braced himself and started to prepare an answer. But before he could utter a single word, a Himbri cut him off with a sly smirk, saying that it was not quite time yet. He went on to explain that Jaehyeon must have already witnessed firsthand just how powerful the corrupted monsters really were. Based on that observation alone, a Himbri confessed that he did not believe someone with Jaehyeon's limited experience should be carrying such an immense responsibility at this point in time. The revelation stunned Jaehyeon deeply. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Then, with a mischievous glint in his eyes, a Himbri added a condition to the challenge. If Jaehyeon would politely beg to become his disciple, a Himbri might then consider helping him prepare for the much greater and more dangerous challenges that awaited him. Though clearly irritated by this demand, Jaehyeon realized that he had no true choice if he wanted to stay firmly on the main quest path. Shortly thereafter, Jaehyeon was seen exiting a Himbri's office. A system interface suddenly appeared before him, confirming that he had completed the quest titled Egg of a Nest. It also notified him that he had earned a new title, a Himbri's Disciple, and that his formal training under a Himbri's guidance would soon begin. As he walked away from the office, Jaehyeon felt a strong wave of irritation wash over him. To his eyes, a Himbri seemed less like a mentor and more like a total scammer, hiding behind the prestigious title of Quest Giver. Meanwhile, in a different part of the world, a group of players celebrated their hard-fought victory against the fearsome dragon lizard. Their jubilation was tempered by the visible fatigue that weighed heavily upon them after the intense battle. The captain of the group gathered everyone and instructed them to rest and regroup later for the next step. After checking the welfare of his team, the captain approached the armored knight who had played a crucial role in the raid's success. He expressed his heartfelt gratitude, admitting that the knight had been far stronger than any of them had expected. The armored knight responded modestly, giving credit to the excellent support provided by the party as a whole. However, the captain shook his head and insisted that, had it been only their group without any outside assistance, at least 5 of them would not have survived. He explained that he had initially been skeptical of the idea of hiring paid players as helpers for boss raids, but after witnessing the results firsthand, he was glad he had made that decision. As a gesture of thanks, the captain offered the knight additional rewards beyond the agreed compensation. But the armored knight refused without hesitation. His tone turned colder, and a shadow crossed his face as he firmly stated that accepting more than the promised compensation would violate his personal code of honor. The captain lowered his head and apologized, admitting that he had assumed the knight's motivation was purely monetary. He also remarked that it seemed unusual for a well-known ranker to appear at a low-level raid like theirs. Without uttering a word in response, the knight simply walked past him, stating that he would collect every item from the nest as promised in their agreement. The captain, somewhat puzzled, called out that there should be nothing valuable left in the nest. The knight didn't even glance back as he continued walking with firm, resolute steps. Inwardly, the knight felt a surge of luck and satisfaction. He had never expected to stumble upon an opportunity to claim the mysterious corruption stone. When he first heard that the dragon lizard had respawned, he immediately grew nervous, fearing that Jaehyeon Mask was already making progress through the quest. However, since the dragon lizard was still alive when the raid began, he reasoned that Jaehyeon Mask must have failed to clear the challenge. As he landed inside the nest, his expectations for Jaehyeon Mask's survival were low, firmly believing that no solo player could possibly handle a boss of such magnitude alone. The knight's excitement steadily built as he approached the nest. His only task now was to retrieve the corruption stone and ensure that Jaehyeon Mask never completed the main quest. However, as he carefully searched the area, his expression darkened with growing frustration. The nest was completely empty. There was no corruption stone, nothing left behind. His eyes scanned every corner meticulously, but it was clear that someone had already arrived before him. Filled with anger and fury, he cursed loudly, the sound echoing across the ruined battlefield like a thunderclap. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room, Jaehyeon sat silently, his expression quiet and serious. He murmured to himself that the time had finally come. Reflecting on the long, grueling days filled with pain and frustration, he remembered all the moments he endured, telling himself that if he could just hold on a little longer, things would start to improve. That belief, that stubborn hope, was the only thing that kept him going through all. Now, a slight smile appeared on his lips as he decided to treat himself. He eagerly declared that he would order beef tonight, a small luxury he had been denying himself for a very long time. Until now, he had lived as frugally as possible, cutting his food costs to the bare minimum in case of emergencies. But with the main quest finally in his hands and a new path opening before him, he figured it was time to enjoy a well-earned reward. Unexpectedly, he received some extra money converted from a donation, forcefully taken from Ilya's fan club members, totaling just a little over 1.2 million won. With that added to his account, his balance now stood at 1.4 million won. The number made him genuinely excited. For a brief moment, everything felt worthwhile, but the moment didn't last long. One by one, system notifications began popping up on his phone, debit alerts from unpaid debts, overdue utility bills, and rent reminders. His excitement quickly faded into disbelief as he watched his balance shrink rapidly until all that remained was a pitiful 856 won. His frustration flared up as he realized that he couldn't even afford a basic meal anymore, let alone the meat for dinner he had just promised himself. As he sat in silence, another notification appeared. It was a message from Ramani, asking if he had decided to quit making video entirely. Jaehyeon picked up his phone, curiosity washing over him as he remembered he hadn't updated anyone about his situation. He hadn't had the time or energy to make new videos, and strange, dangerous people were actively targeting him now. He began typing a response, but stopped midway, frustrated having no money. He wondered if it even mattered anymore whether people like that were worth fearing when he was literally on the brink of starvation. The pressure, the fear, the expectations, they all felt meaningless now. He was tired of playing it safe, tired of living in constant fear. If the world wanted to throw monsters and freaks at him, he would face them all his own way. In a dark, eerie place filled with crooked tombstones and an unsettling silence, Jaehyeon entered once again, flanked by his summoned skeletons. He stepped forward with steady resolve as the cold, emotionless system interface appeared before him, confirming that he had entered the forest of the